The scene opens with a breathtaking shot of the grand structure belonging to the 4th Academy in the city of Su. Headmaster Sui Jinlong declares that the long-awaited day has come. Students will officially awaken as players. On this occasion, the system itself will assign each of them a distinct class. Options include warriors like swordsmen and knights, stealthy assassins, or spell-wielding mages. A glowing formation suddenly appears beneath the feet of each student. Among them stands a boy named Cho Yu, who quietly reflects that 18 years have passed since his reincarnation. This realm is known as Kaiji, a parallel dimension that mirrors Earth in many ways. The single major distinction is that Kaiji contains labyrinths filled with danger. When its inhabitants reach 18, they acquire powers meant to help them conquer these dungeons. Stepping through the portal, which the locals call the inner world, Cho Yu silently wishes to be blessed with a favorable class. A disembodied voice asks if this is his first visit, and he confirms it is. After what feels like a loading screen, a darkened skull cloaked in shadows circles him while a notification appears, announcing that he has received a hidden class. The class is revealed to be Necromancer, leaving the boy completely astonished. This path is considered one of the rarest. Only a handful of people in recorded history have ever obtained it. With a mere swing of his weapon, such a class can summon legions of elite skeletons. As long as mana flows, he can fight like an army by himself. The protagonist muses that rare classes usually come with greatly enhanced statistics. Yet, upon inspection, he notices that his spirit attribute sits at 0. He is completely taken aback. How could a necromancer, whose essence relies on spirit, begin with none at all? Initial stats are randomly rolled, with 10 as the maximum, and spirit is vital for his role. Unluckily, he has drawn the worst possible result. The system proceeds, announcing it will now generate a random talent. But his despair is so deep that he doubts even an S-rank ability could save him. At last, the system grants him an unfamiliar power labeled Brave Heart of a Mage, whose grade is undisclosed. This talent allows him to earn 1 attribute point every time he defeats a foe using only physical strikes, letting him strengthen 1 core stat at a time. This is extraordinary, since normally attributes grow only upon leveling. With this new gift, he could accumulate them endlessly through combat. It carried the possibility of maxing out all his stats. Even as a newcomer, he now held the chance to reach the absolute peak in every category, a terrifying prospect for any opponent. He resolved to build his stats to the limit before using the ability recklessly, ensuring he would become unstoppable. Because only physical blows activated the talent, he decided strength was his first priority. Thus, every one of his 10 points was placed into strength. With 20 strength overall, his vitality exceeded that of most peers. Having completed this, he needed to clear the initiation challenge to finalize his class awakening. In an instant, he was transported to the trial's location, standing before a shimmering gate, accompanied by a young woman who had been assigned as his guide. Her name was Elaine, and she explained that she was there to assist should he require help. He told her his goal was to register and complete the novice mission. Delighted, she agreed to support him and presented him with a starter's package. Within it lay a tattered cloak, a beginner's staff, and a manual explaining how to summon skeletons. The cloak functioned as equipment, while the staff, due to his lack of spirit, seemed practically useless. Yet with his newfound physical power, it could serve as a formidable club. He was then informed of his trial, to survive and escape from the Misty Cavern. The task demanded speed, vigilance, and restraint, especially avoiding the destruction of skeletal soldiers. Elaine tried to explain further about the dangers and penalties involved, but before she could finish, he had already rushed through the portal. Inside, he ventured deeper into the cavern, where heaps of bones littered the ground. It dawned on him that Elaine had likely been warning him of something crucial. He had underestimated the challenge, unnerved by the sheer number of skeletons lying in wait. Before long, one spotted him as prey and lunged forward. The clatter of its bones announced its attack. This foe was a level 1 skeleton, possessing 5 strength and a single point of agility. Cho Yu gripped his staff tightly, ready to wield it as a weapon. Their clash was inevitable. With a mighty swing, his blow shattered the creature instantly. Its skull rolled across the floor, lifeless. He checked carefully to confirm it was defeated, regretting that he could not rely on magic. For that victory, he earned 1 attribute point, 3 experience, and unlocked a powerful passive skill, Miracle of the Mighty, doubling the attack value of his strength. Strength governed offense, while defense lessened harm taken. Thanks to the passive, each point of strength now counted as 2 in attack. Against unarmored foes, he could deliver 42 damage per strike, utterly overwhelming. As he processed this new power, multiple skeletal hands began clawing their way out of the ground. These creatures advanced with daggers, moving in eerie rhythm like dancers of death. Realizing he had no time to waste, he focused solely on clearing the mission. The horde pressed forward, determined to succeed where the first had failed. But one sweep of his staff crushed them, sending them back into lifeless piles. He gained 4 attribute points and 12 more experience. Leveling up, he received 5 additional stat points, raising his strength to 30. Most prodigies barely reached 10 at this stage. The ease unsettled him. Were these skeletons deliberately weak to let him grow? Soon enough, another figure emerged from the earth. This was a level 3 captain, wielding 15 strength and 20 defense. A serious threat, capable of inflicting lethal damage if it managed to strike. But with a single agility point, it was clumsy. His first swing, however, was stopped by its shield. The captain retaliated, striking the ground he had just vacated. The force was frightening. Its blow gouged a hole in the cavern floor. Recognizing its slowness, he spotted a gap in its guard. He thrust his staff directly into the skeleton's exposed ribs. The hit unbalanced it, sending it crashing down and opening the way for a finishing blow. Exhilarated, he mocked the creature, daring it to defend again. Then he slammed his staff down on its back like a crushing baton. From this victory, he gained 3 stat points and 10 experience. The fight had been tougher than he imagined, and he wondered how other students could be coping. He recalled the director's remark that monsters sometimes dropped cores, granting unexpected rewards. He was curious to see what this captain held. It yielded a pair of consumable gloves that guaranteed a critical strike on the next attack, though usable only once. As he examined the item in thought, additional skeletons began to rise all around him. He hadn't expected more enemies, but their numbers kept increasing. Though he had reached level 2, his health was still only 20, urging him to tread carefully. Even so, his overwhelming strength made dispatching them trivial, and he collected 10 more stat points. Fortunately, their single agility point kept them sluggish, preventing them from posing much danger. Checking his status window, he saw that by level 3 his strength had already soared to 46. Meanwhile, outside, students compared the classes they had awakened. Some felt pride at the thought of impressing their families. Director Jin Long, however, stayed quiet, seemingly awaiting one last participant. Confusion spread. Why was the trial taking so long? After all, the exercise was simple. Just flee from the skeletons, which moved slowly. One of the students who knew him began to worry. Inside, Cho Yu wondered if the wave of skeletons had finally ended, and why the system had not yet marked the mission complete. Then, from the darkness, a chilling voice demanded how he dared to intrude. Every nerve tightened as he turned toward the source. Skulls lifted into the air, hovering ominously. They whirled through the cave, forcing him to dodge constantly. Bones began piecing together before his eyes, forming a massive figure. From the ground rose shadows that burned like flame, coalescing into a monstrous being. Standing before him was a nightmarish opponent, more fearsome than anything he had yet faced. It was the Skeleton King, already injured but still armed with 45 strength, 60 defense, and deadly skills like piercing bone and explosive bone. A boss of this caliber in a novice mission was absurd. Did Director Jin Long intend for these students to perish as nothing but memories? The Skeleton King made the first move, preparing to unleash its strike. The Skeleton King's opening strike missed, the young man barely slipping aside. He knew that if it had connected, survival would have been impossible. His only advantage was the king's sluggish speed, but the greater challenge was piercing such an impenetrable defense. There was only one way to test it. He swung his staff at an exposed rib. The weapon connected. The impact registered 32 damage. Success. Now, it was simply a matter of repeating the process 10 more times. With renewed determination, he launched a relentless flurry of blows. The king's lack of agility meant it could barely react to the strikes. Weakened from the barrage, the giant skeleton toppled forward to the ground. The young man paused, puzzled. Why had it collapsed when its health bar still showed 200? Then the unexpected revealed itself. This was the first time the Skeleton King had faced someone who relied solely on brute force inside the cavern. Without its army of underlings, it had grown vulnerable. The player, a mere novice, had managed to penetrate its defenses. The boss refused to allow him to leave alive. Enraged, the Skeleton King's aura intensified, its body radiating power. Its eyes locked on the boy, tracking his every step, its movements suddenly sharper and quicker. It lashed out again, and Amir barely evaded. Though still quicker than the king, the margin for error had narrowed dangerously. Direct assaults would no longer suffice. He needed to adjust to the monster's speed. Another strike came, and Amir noticed a precarious boulder above. The rock formation trembled, ready to fall. He sidestepped, moving toward it as he and the king exchanged tense stares, each reading the other's intent. Provoking it deliberately, Amir dared the boss to attack him near the unstable stone. The bait worked. The king charged. Amir blocked with his staff, but the sheer power hurled him across the cavern, tearing away 26 health. That shove left him with only 4 points of life remaining. Unsatisfied, the towering creature advanced, determined to crush him entirely. Amir realized even a glancing blow would end him. The monster swung again, blind to its surroundings. The ceiling cracked, dislodging rocks that came crashing down on its skull. The cave's collapse inflicted 70 damage. Pinned under debris, the king now had just 129 health remaining. Amir knew this was his only chance. He had to finish it here. With so little life left, prolonging the battle meant certain death. He steadied himself for one decisive strike. Sliding on the single-use gloves, he activated their critical hit guarantee. But instead of using his staff, he clenched his fists. The immobilized skeleton could do nothing but watch. With a thunderous punch, he smashed the ground, cracking stone beneath them. The shadowy flames cloaking the king flickered, then began to fade. The system voice resounded. Mission complete. For being the first to kill the boss, he was granted 30 attribute points. Because he had slain it barehanded, he received an extra 10 points, 50 experience, and advanced 3 levels. On top of that came an unexpected drop. The Skeleton King's Ring. The item boosted the next attack by 50%, with a 1-day cooldown. A rare C-class relic, valuable enough to sell for a fortune. Amir felt a thrill. He had been the first ever to bring down this monster. He briefly wondered how others had passed the trial, but set the thought aside. What mattered was getting out alive. His stats now showed 76 strength, enhanced by the brave heart of the mage talent, and miracle of the mighty. With those, he reappeared outside among the gathered students. His friend Yang rushed over and embraced him, relief plain after hours of anxiety. Yang demanded to know why it had taken him so long, baffled since everyone else had finished quickly. 3 hours had passed since the last participant, so Amir asked Yang what class he'd been given. Yang proudly revealed he was now a mage. Odd, since they had entered the same world. Another student, Asnab, stepped forward, pointing out that Amir was the final one to finish. Meifei, the class nuisance, sneered and asked mockingly if Amir wanted to know his class. Amir sighed, wondering why this boy always picked fights with him. It felt like dealing with a spoiled child. Before tension could rise further, the director addressed the crowd, declaring that training would begin tomorrow, and that each student must reveal their class and talent. Some announced proudly, while others muttered reluctantly, embarrassed by low-ranked talents. One girl revealed she was both mage and healer, introducing herself as Xiao. Another, Ju, announced herself as a paladin with a B-rank ability. Meifei boasted he was a swordsman, also with B-rank talent. A few students flattered him, noting that swordsmen were highly valued. The director thought to himself that several of these B-rank youths might become exceptional. Then Amir's turn came. He declared his class Necromancer. But before mentioning his talent, he hesitated, best not to reveal what he himself did not fully understand. Director Jinlong smiled inwardly. A necromancer meant a hidden class. The students gasped. Legends told of a single necromancer once erasing an entire guild. Meifei was skeptical, pointing out that mages were fragile up close. Necromancers, weaker still, relied on others for protection while they conjured. Since Amir kept his talent secret, Meifei concluded it must be worthless. Others, however, admired Amir for not flaunting his hidden class. If they had one, they'd already be boasting. Yet Amir himself worried, since he couldn't cast a single spell and doubted he'd survive training. The director, however, believed that once he mastered the fundamentals, Amir would have his pick of the best academies in the nation. After the presentations ended, the students were dismissed to rest. Yang congratulated him, wishing he too had drawn the necromancer class. Still, with 8 strength points and a decent talent, Yang felt determined. Effort would make up the rest. Seeing Yang's attributes stuck in single digits, Amir realized just how far ahead he was. Finally, he returned to his empty home. He always called out upon arrival, though no parents answered. Kind souls who in this world had raised him with warmth. At 6, they had traveled to the capital, but they never came back, leaving him alone. 12 years had passed since, and he still longed for answers. More than anything, he yearned to go to the capital and uncover their fate. The next morning, the director gathered the students, stating he had only one request. If they felt unready, they must retreat without hesitation. Better to fail training than to lose their lives. Deaths were rare in the beginner worlds, but exceptions always existed. Once, an entire class of 40 students vanished forever. No one knew what nightmare they had faced. The place was only remembered by its name, Nightmare Village. The warning chilled the students. But it won't be so dreadful this time, the director assured. As long as they returned before time expired, they'd be safe. When the timer hit 0, the portal would reopen. At last, the countdown reached its end. Training began. Dark lightning cracked the air, transporting them to a new realm. They appeared in a deserted village, its silence unsettling. Some glanced around nervously, while Meifei strutted confidently, claiming his presence alone guaranteed their safety. But from the shadows, a pair of hidden feet observed, silently watching their every move. Brimming with confidence, Meifei urged the others to follow his lead, claiming he would guide them to victory in this trial. He wanted to prove beyond doubt that he was the strongest and that even though Kyo carried a hidden class, he still couldn't compare to him. Yet the atmosphere was unsettling. Stranger still, no prompts from the system had appeared since they arrived. A shadowed figure emerged, muttering that the scene before him was truly pathetic. Because they were so young, he said, it was almost tragic. Unsure if he was an NPC or something else, Kyo asked what exactly he meant. The man finally addressed them formally, announcing that they had entered the Nightmare Village, a realm where the seemingly simple task carried S-rank difficulty. He clarified that its scale was measured differently. What looked like an S-class here equaled an E-class dungeon elsewhere. Their mission: survive and discover the secret buried in the heart of the village. Recalling the director's warning, dread swept over the group. Terror drove some to bolt for the exit, desperate to flee. Meifei tried to steady their nerves, explaining that to handle an E-rank challenge, one should at least be at the beginning stage of cultivation. But all of them were still mere disciples. Above that lay stages of initial, intermediate, final, king, and divine. When one student ran to the gate, an invisible barrier stopped him cold. The man explained calmly that once inside, escape was no longer possible. Panic spread like wildfire, leaving the group hopeless. Kyo, however, sensed the man was not lying. He wasn't an enemy, but someone brutally honest. It suddenly seemed believable that past classes really had vanished here. Walking among them, the stranger told them to relax and make themselves at home. Meifei mistook the words as encouragement, a call to face the challenge with bravery. In truth, the man was telling them to accept death quietly. The weight of his tone only deepened the fear. Several students nearly collapsed. He gave his name as Wugum, chief of the village, and explained 2 strict rules. They could take any empty house as lodging, but were forbidden from touching the black stones on the doors. The second rule: be inside before nightfall, lock every door and window, and under no circumstances open them again until morning. When Kyo asked why, Wugum replied he would understand once the sun went down. At dusk, they obeyed, splitting into 4 groups of 11 and entering separate houses. One team led by Kino entered a small home. The doors shut firmly behind them. Someone suggested climbing to the 2nd floor for safety. The healer approached a boy, asking for his protection if danger came. She explained that in return, she could restore his health whenever needed. Another girl scoffed, accusing her of flirting openly in front of everyone. Their bickering quickly turned petty. The smaller girl mocked her rival's weight, claiming her stats were only high because she was fat. Meanwhile, one student peeked nervously out the window. He froze. Outside stood his grandmother, whom he hadn't seen in years and dearly missed. She whispered that she was cold and begged him to let her inside. Blinded by longing, he began to open the window. Zhao shouted at him to stop, warning that it wasn't his grandmother. But the latch had already come undone. Her eyes glowed crimson as she lunged at him, jaws like a beast's snapping shut. The boy was seconds from being devoured. Then, a glowing spear manifested inside the room, pinning the creature in place. It was Yang, who warned he couldn't restrain it for long but had bought enough time for the boy to escape. The monster was level 3, carrying 25 strength and agility. Ordinary in higher realms, but devastating for beginners. Its attention locked onto the mage, and it charged. Cornered, the mage quipped that if the beast ate him, all his fat would give it indigestion. A shimmering barrier snapped into place, halting the strike. It had been cast by the smaller girl, but the effort began draining her health rapidly. She cried out to the healer for support and urged Kyo to summon his undead. They immediately set to work. The healer channeled energy, restoring health as fast as it drained. They could win if everyone cooperated, so long as Kyo performed his summoning. But instead of chanting, he was already at the front. With one crushing swing of his staff, he knocked the monster back. Yang shouted in alarm, warning him that using the staff as a club was reckless. Yet KO struck again, and the creature lost 50 health in a single blow. The monster collapsed, gone, leaving the others in stunned silence. Nobody could believe a nightmare had been defeated so easily. Was this truly how a necromancer fought? All that remained was a black stone, while the rest of the creature dissolved. The stone bore the same mark etched onto the house doors. Kyo noticed he hadn't received any points for the kill, likely some glitch. When asked if he saw anything unusual, he dismissed it as his imagination. By morning, Yang thanked everyone. Without them, he doubted he would have survived. Others praised Kyo's strength and Zhu's barrier, comments that Meifei overheard. He sneered, convinced that if he had been there, he'd have done even better. In fact, he bragged he too could kill a nightmare with a single strike. When Kyo asked if he was training already, Yang explained that it was expected of the class monitor. Meifei tried to cover his embarrassment, claiming he was only warming up. Then he told Zhu to stay by his side, swearing he'd protect her from harm. But she replied firmly that shielding others was her duty. If she avoided injury, it would fall on someone else. Teamwork mattered, she said, and they should learn from Kyo. Before more could be said, a furious shout rang out demanding their deaths. No one was to escape. All would be burned. The village chief commanded the villagers to attack anyone who resisted. Meifei tried to argue that there must be a mistake, but the chief growled that they knew exactly what they had done. Kyo noticed both groups were evenly matched in number and age. The chief declared that the nightmares were the village's guardians, and by breaking the rules, the students had committed grave sins. For this, punishment would be multiplied 1,000-fold. Meifei asked if there was another way out, explaining the monster had been slain by accident. The chief admitted there was. The one who angered the nightmares must spend the night outside. He wondered aloud if any among them possessed such courage. With unknown horrors in the dark, it was little more than a death sentence. Kyo stepped forward, claiming responsibility and agreeing to spend the night outside. Meifei panicked, insisting Kyo had gone mad. But Kyo was calm. He had something he wanted to test, something that might reveal how to escape this cursed place. Bound by chains, he was tied in the village square. A girl asked him what he meant about knowing a way to help. Did he truly understand the secret of the village? He admitted he had a theory, but it needed proof once night came. The moon climbed into the sky, bathing the empty streets in silver. That was when the nightmares emerged again. One crawled down from a rooftop, moving with eerie grace. Spotting him chained, it hurled itself straight at him. But Kyo had expected this and did not flinch. What startled him was the sudden barrier spell that shimmered to life around him. His friend shouted that Kyo had to act fast. He couldn't maintain the spell much longer. Meifei boldly stepped forward, insisting he could handle the nightmare alone and telling the others not to panic. The harsh truth struck Meifei almost instantly. He barely managed to deflect the nightmare's strike with his blade. The creature's speed overwhelmed him, leaving him baffled how Kyo, supposedly just a mage, had ever slain one. Arrogance pushed him onward. If Kyo had done it, surely he could as well. His blade connected, yet it inflicted a mere 5 points of damage. To his surprise, the others had come outside after all, unwilling to let him face danger alone. The girl remarked that the chains binding Kyo were too thick for any of them to cut. Only Meifei's sword might stand a chance, though he was occupied. Kyo, however, shattered the chains with his bare hands. That display of raw strength made the others question if he truly was a necromancer. Meifei, meanwhile, continued to flounder against the nightmare. The girls and Kyo rushed to aid him, while Jo readied her healing magic. Meifei waved her off, claiming he didn't need it, arguing that scars were proof of a warrior's worth. He instructed them to target the head, believing it to be the weak point. Kyo obliged, striking hard and bringing the monster down. Meifei muttered that he should have realized that sooner, but Kyo corrected him, saying the head wasn't truly the weak spot. Meifei suspected sabotage, determined to watch what Kyo did next. He expected to witness something extraordinary. Instead, the nightmare stirred and rose once more, making him doubt whether Yang had been right about vulnerabilities. Yet Kyo had managed it before. Perhaps it was simply beyond his own skill. This wounded his pride, yet he told himself he was still superior. The others called him back, warning that pressing on recklessly would only get him killed. The nightmare, indifferent, prepared another assault. Meifei unleashed a furious combo, carving 30 points of damage into it. He was one hit away from proving himself equal to Kyo. When Kyo's staff delivered the finishing strike, Outrage consumed Mei Fei. Kyo praised his effort, but the monitor fumed, furious at having his kill stolen. Seething, Mei Fei accused Kyo of stealing the loot. But when Kyo picked up the item, nothing happened. Before anyone could react, 2 more nightmares charged. Kyo ordered everyone inside. There was no reason to fight now. He had a different plan for escaping. They retreated into the house while the nightmares prowled outside. Once safe, the others pressed him on how they would get out of this cursed place. He told them to wait until morning. When the time came, they should follow his instructions exactly. The next dawn, the chief was enraged that another guardian spirit had been destroyed. No matter their excuse, he insisted all the students had to die for what they had done to Nightmare Village. Kyo asked if they truly lived here, and the chief swore his people had been here for generations. Kyo declared he had uncovered the truth about the village, though the chief failed to grasp his meaning. Pointing at the villagers, Kyo revealed they were not the original inhabitants at all. They were, in fact, the very class of students who had vanished years ago. Trapped here since entering, they had never been able to leave. The chief shouted that such talk was nonsense, dismissing it as lies. But Kyo claimed he had proof. When the chief held up a black stone, he accused Kyo of committing a crime punishable by death. And not just him. Every student now held a similar stone. The chief's face drained of color. Those stones were their shields of survival. And now, with them broken, the wrath of the gods would fall upon all. In reality, the stones kept the village intact. Destroying them would unravel the realm itself. Kyo urged his classmates to shatter them all. As the stones cracked, fissures split the very sky. Memories surged back to the chief. He remembered his vow to the director to bring his classmates home. They had once been enthusiastic students, dreaming of university, only to enter this nightmare instead. All of them had been attacked together on that fateful day. He had tried to calm their panic, but in the end, they were transformed. Now he recalled it all, how he became their village leader. He had once been their monitor. As the truth was revealed, the system announced that rewards would be distributed individually, and teleportation would soon begin. The fallen monitor thanked them for their efforts. Yang asked how Kyo had figured everything out, but Kyo promised to explain once they returned. Yet as time passed, they realized they were still inside. Hadn't the mission ended? A new prompt appeared. 5 of them had received a secret quest. They must recover the Heart of Nightmares, rated E in difficulty. Kyo was now level 5 with a staggering 101 strength. The rest had already left. Only Kyo and a handful remained. If true, this secret mission would all but guarantee them entrance into top academies. But its danger was undeniable. They might not make it out alive. Except for Kyo, the others were barely level 3. Success seemed impossible. One girl asked if breaking the stones had really been necessary to learn the truth. Yang suspected Kyo had wanted his classmates to join him in this secret test. Mei Fei scoffed, but his competitiveness drove him to try to finish it before Kyo. A monstrous hand clawed over the rooftop. Within moments, many more appeared, converging to annihilate the students. The creatures bellowed that every last student must perish. 4 surrounded them, and Yang admitted their chances looked slim, urging everyone to coordinate. Mei Fei lunged first, carving 10 damage into 1. He fumed that he still couldn't down a monster in 1 blow. The mage gasped that her mana was nearly gone, while Ju staggered, her health almost empty. But Kyo finished the nightmare, earning another attribute point. Ju cried out that 2 more were closing fast. Kyo struck swiftly, felling them before they touched the ground, and collected even more points. A glowing core materialized nearby. At this level, the reward was excellent. A mage-restricted item, granting a 5% boost to magic damage. Kyo considered gifting it to Yang. Ju applauded their teamwork, while Mei Fei tried to claim credit, though Tuao urged everyone to keep moving. He muttered that just 1 more kill would level him up, maybe even net him new gear. Excited, he insisted they keep hunting. The Heart of Nightmares had to be among them. But one careless step triggered a trap. The ground gave way beneath their feet. They plummeted helplessly into the darkness. Kyo landed softly, realizing he had fallen onto Yang. Yang groaned, asking why the floor felt so uncomfortably soft. Checking quickly, Kyo confirmed everyone had survived the fall intact. A nauseating stench filled the cavern, like rotting sewage. Ju speculated it might be corpses decaying, but the healer shook her head. It came from something else entirely. Then they saw it. Before them loomed the Nightmare King. 1,000 health, 65 strength, 20 defense, 60 agility, wielding powers of compulsion and nightmare realm. The beast slumbered, and the system warned that disturbing it would send it into a frenzy. Kyo's chest tightened. Such a boss was beyond reason. With that kind of strength, Ju couldn't block even a single attack. They prayed the heart wasn't hidden within it. Meifei whispered that leaving it asleep was best, but Krav countered that they had a fighting chance. With 202 attack power in his ring, his opening strike could tear away a third of its health. He calculated that 3 or 4 perfect hits might be enough, though the risk was staggering. Yang scoffed that it was madness to think so, but Kyo argued that if they combined their strengths, they could prevail. The king's defense was low. Hearing this, Meifei realized the only way was to draw its attention. Krav argued that if the others could hold the creature's focus, he'd be able to land clean blows. Kyo warned them that this plan carried huge risk. The nightmare moved faster than any of them, and one strike could end their lives. Even so, the group trusted Kyo's judgment and agreed to proceed. Meifei cautioned him against showing off, reminding him this boss was no ordinary foe. Kyo only smiled, insisting they stay calm. After a brief rest to steady themselves, they prepared to execute the strategy. The nightmare would remain dormant until struck, so the opening blow had to count. Kyo's eyes caught a peculiar shimmer on the monster's body. A single spot gleamed brighter than the rest. Perhaps that was its weak point. Raising his staff, he lined up his strike. The ring's enchantment flared, increasing his attack power by half. His hit landed critically, ripping away 508 health in one stroke. His companions gawked, unable to believe a mage could inflict so much damage. Kyo had pierced the nightmare's heart, and the mission shifted immediately. Their objective was now to slay the nightmare outright. The quest had risen to rank A. The colossal creature staggered awake, fury blazing in its hollow eyes. They had to follow the plan without hesitation. Enormous compared to the players, the nightmare roared, calling them vile humans. It was Meifei's turn to draw its ire. Throwing himself forward, he began his roll. Blades flashed as he rained blows upon the boss, but the vast gap in strength gnawed at him. Kyo's power eclipsed his completely. Still, pride pushed him to keep swinging. Each strike chipped away a single health point. The nightmare sneered, promising to grant him the honor of dying first. Bracing himself, Meifei shouted for it to face him if it had any courage. That was the cue for Yang and Ju to move. Sand and shields formed, layering their defenses. For a moment, it seemed the boss's attacks were held at bay. Yet Meifei still bled under the pressure, and the healer struggled to keep up. Her strength was waning rapidly. Kyo realized that unless he acted, Meifei would be crushed. Charging forward, he delivered another devastating strike, stripping 182 health from the monster. With its vitality dwindling, the nightmare unleashed its ultimate power. The Nightmare Realm. Shadows erupted, waves of energy blasting the area. His allies had no defense against such area damage. This couldn't be allowed to continue. Kyo was convinced the last class had perished here because of this very skill. Determined to stop it, he struck again, inflicting the same massive wound. The creature now had only a sliver of health remaining. Kyo advanced to finish it once and for all. The healer warned desperately. Her mana was spent. Aware of the risk, he prepared his final strike. His blow connected, draining the last of the nightmare's life. For the first time ever, the monster fell, rewarding him with 30 ability points and an extra 10 from his talent. Leveling up added another 10. The mission concluded, and each player would now receive their individual rewards. Their victory felt unreal. Shidao was granted a D-rank talent, while Zhu obtained a C-rank one. Yang earned an E-rank talent, and Meifei a D-rank as well. Kyo topped them all, gaining a B-rank spellbook and 50 experience. Though it could not yet be used, the nightmare's soul still pulsed with hidden promise. From it manifested a gleaming B-rank sword, with plus 100 attack, 30% defense penetration, and a 20% bonus to sword strikes. For Kyo, it was almost useless. He had no desire for a sword, so he handed it to Meifei, who was stunned at such generosity. The monitor muttered it could sell for enough gold to buy a home in the capital, but Kyo dismissed the thought, already checking for other items. His stats showed monstrous strength, yet his health remained fragile. His talent restricted other attributes from growing, and he knew he needed a way to fix that weakness. Resilience and caution would have to guide him from now on. At last, the transport sequence began. The 5 survivors rematerialized at their academy. Their sudden reappearance sent waves of shock through the gymnasium. The director exclaimed they had been missing for 2 full days, demanding to know what happened. He hadn't expected them back alive. After hearing their tale, he said fortune was on their side, and this ordeal would open countless paths. The rest of the students were ecstatic, proud their class had produced so many prodigies. Yet Meifei's competitiveness burned hotter. With his new weapon, he believed he could one day surpass Kyo. He only needed more levels. Then a messenger burst in, announcing that representatives from 2 prestigious universities had arrived, specifically to meet the 5 of them. The director hadn't reported anything, yet somehow the news had already spread. He welcomed the professors into the hall. 2 men entered, Professors Peng and Pei. Pei congratulated the 5, applauding their secret mission success. He declared that Jindu University wanted them immediately, offering recommendation letters on the spot. Professor Peng objected, saying no such promises should be made without proper testing. The 2 bickered Pei of Hulkin University, reassuring the students that the test was only meant to gauge adaptability. It wasn't about raw power, but how they handled unfamiliar scenarios. Kyo, as a necromancer, couldn't yet reveal his class abilities, but his heart was set on Jindu, for there he might learn the truth about his parents. The professor asked who would test first. Meifei stepped forward, announcing himself as a level 5 swordsman with a B-rank talent. The professor noted that reaching level 5 so soon after beginner trials was impressive. Pai encouraged him to attack, cautioning that he was level 25 and a marksman. Meifei charged, telling the professor not to underestimate him. His sword clashed against a magical barrier, the tip piercing through, startling the veteran. The professor praised the skill, and Meifei bowed gratefully. They estimated his strength at around 35, with impressive agility to match. The audience of students erupted in excitement, amazed by his performance. The professors exchanged looks. Such a recruit was worth fighting over. Both asked if he had already chosen his university, each eager to claim him. Meifei deferred, saying he wanted to see the others tested first. In truth, he intended to follow wherever Kyo went. Next came the healer, demonstrating her magic. She healed her entire group effortlessly, though she was only level 4. The paladin's shield was equally remarkable. Even at level 4, she could reflect 1/5 of any absorbed damage. For a tank role, such an ability was priceless. Pei assumed Yang must be another paladin, but was surprised to hear he was actually a mage. His towering build made him look like anything but. His trial began, and Yang readied himself. The professor frowned. He couldn't sense any spellcasting at all. Then Yang stomped the ground, unleashing his skill. A massive explosion tore through the center of the hall. Even as a level 25 marksman, the professor lost 3 health points, a frightening sign of the boy's potential. The faculty exchanged uneasy glances. This class had produced 5 extraordinary talents, and their principal would have to keep close watch. Some wondered if Yang himself might also be one of those rare prodigies. At last, it was Kao's turn. He was already level 7, a necromancer whose talent grade remained unclassified. 2 levels ahead of his peers, the professor assumed this meant his gift must be mediocre. They decided to test his abilities first and discuss his talent afterward. Expecting summoned undead, the professor braced himself. He didn't want another beginner catching him off guard. Yet as Kao stepped forward, the professor was surprised. His manner was unlike any necromancers he had seen, and didn't fit the expected role at all. Perhaps he was simply inexperienced. Only then did the professor realize a fist was hurtling toward his face. Curious about a mage's physical strength, he chose not to dodge. The punch connected with brutal force. The professor was knocked across the floor, leaving the gym in stunned silence. Even the principal was dumbfounded. A novice had floored a level 25 professor with 1 strike. The second professor suggested he must have held back. Necromancers weren't supposed to have such strength. But something was clearly unusual about Kao, who had nearly flattened him. The students buzzed, debating how a necromancer could possess such physical might. Peng silently thanked fate that he hadn't taken the blow himself, or he might have lost teeth. Kao asked if that concluded the test. The answer was yes, but they insisted his evaluation wasn't complete without seeing him summon the undead. Kao responded that his focus was mastering physical combat, though his true goal was entry into Jingdu University. Such a declaration was unheard of. No necromancer had ever specialized as a warrior. Peng decided to consult the principal. Over the phone, he explained that the boy was terrifying. Despite his class, Kao sought warrior training and had already overpowered a level 25 professor. The principal immediately demanded all 5 students be recruited at any cost. Afraid of losing him, Peng arranged a direct video call. On the screen appeared Jiaping Yang, the director of Jingdu University, personally inviting Kao to join. But before the director could finish, Kao cut him off. He accepted on the spot. Peng's heart sank at losing such a prodigy. and he could only hope to secure one of the others. The director suggested the entire group transfer together, and they agreed, much to Peng's despair and Pei's delight. It was the triumph of his career. Still, Cao pressed with questions. Had the director known his father, Cao Anking? The revelation stunned the man. He realized now that Cao was the son of Anking and Bai Shixi, which explained the familiar features. Cao asked if he knew where his parents were. The director explained that over a decade ago, they had been his students, extraordinary ones. But they had vanished after graduation, never to be heard from again. They had spoken of a hidden world, and the director urged Cao to explore it. Answers might await him there. He promised to send admission letters. He advised them to progress through worlds tied to their class types to avoid suspicion. With his blessing, he wished them luck. A week passed, and the five prepared for their next exam, this time a world designed for mages. Success would require teamwork, as their minds would be tested. The criteria for passing were finally revealed. Blue flames rose around the portal. Cao asked Yang if he was prepared. Yang replied that practice beat theory, but the more participants, the greater the risk. He suggested Cao join him. The challenge could be attempted repeatedly, and rewards would stack. Yang was eager to see what awaited. The guide welcomed them, declaring a two-player world had been chosen. Their trial would take place in the Cave of 10,000 Poisons. Before the guide could explain the rules, Cao charged ahead, leaving Yang shaking his head. No clear instructions were given, and Yang muttered that no one had asked how Cao had cleared the skeleton dungeon. He assumed Cao must have been reckless. Within the cave dwelled a tribe capable of poisoning victims without their knowledge. Their worms would consume people from within until nothing remained. The mission? Locate the tribe and eradicate the worms. Rewards would depend on how thoroughly they succeeded. Because the quest required 5 players, the system paired them with 3 others. One scoffed, warning them not to slow him down. A girl scolded him, introducing herself as Fang Yuan, a fire mage. Her younger brother Fang Sun was also a fire mage, while the last member was Long Chang. Yang and Cao introduced themselves, expressing hope for cooperation. At the cave's entrance, instructions appeared, but the rude boy tried blasting the door open. His attack failed. The stone was immune to magic, carved with the words, "Morality and integrity promote peace." If magic failed, perhaps brute force would succeed. The girl solved the riddle, but Cao punched the door before she could act, shattering it instantly. The rude boy looked humiliated, and the girl stood in disbelief. She had solved the puzzle, but the way forward was already clear. Cao explained he had only wanted to test strength against it. He hadn't expected it to crumble so easily. The next chamber's door was surrounded by strange flowers. They were unnatural, and caution was urged, but Yang was already ensnared. Within moments, poison afflicted them all, draining 3 health points per minute. If they didn't escape soon, they'd perish. Cao, with his low health, wouldn't last half an hour. The inscription on the door seemed useless, so they rushed it instead. No time to puzzle it out. Action was their only option. Cao struck again, smashing the barrier. Brute force cleared the way, sparing them. Though designed as a mental trial, they hadn't yet needed their minds at all. That marked the end of the first section. A small child appeared, introducing herself as Xiao Dong. She asked if they had come from outside. Noticing their condition, she explained the poison came from the bean flower. If left unchecked, it would spread until no cure was possible. They needed her guidance to find the antidote. With little choice, they followed. At her village, she presented them to her parents, explaining she had brought outsiders. The parents asked who they were, and the girl told them they were poisoned strangers. Upon hearing this, they invited them inside to be treated. Soon, bowls of strange venom soup were placed before them. Its appearance was unpleasant, dark, and slimy. No one dared drink, until Cao, down to half his health, gulped it down without hesitation. He finished in one draft. To everyone's surprise, he declared it tasty and free of poison, urging the rest to follow. He then asked the child about the tribe they sought. She admitted she knew little, except that the patriarch warned them never to leave the village or use magic carelessly. Once cured, her mother urged them to depart. They weren't used to hosting outsiders, but the child protested, begging them to stay since visitors were rare. She told them to ignore her mother, promising they could remain as long as they liked. Cao agreed. They were weak and needed rest, though something about the family felt off. The girl wished them good night and showed them to their quarters. Then she escorted her parents out herself. That night, under the rising full moon, the truth revealed itself. The villagers gathered in a single place. They were performing a sacrifice, offering victims to the insects for harvest and health. At the altar, the priestess dripped a crimson liquid that looked like tomato juice. From the ground burst a monstrous swarm of insects. They fell upon the bound sacrifices. In moments, nothing remained but bones, and the players stared in horror at the gruesome sight. They immediately realized they had to escape before it was too late. Ken possessed great strength, but lacked wide-range attacks. At the altar, the priestess spotted their presence. She ordered her warriors to capture the intruders, but strictly alive. Back inside the cabin, the group scrambled to decide what to do. If the villagers learned their true mission was to destroy the insects, they would surely be attacked. As they argued, Kian heard a noise and asked what it was. Swarming insects had slipped inside, crawling everywhere. The fire mage unleashed a fiery spell to shield them. Kian joined in, striking down the creatures, though they were too weak to grant him any rewards. He reasoned that if such weaklings did yield points, it would be far too easy. Yang then unleashed his sand technique within the cabin. Impressed, Kian praised him for combining two talents, though it drained nearly all of Yang's mana. Then a tribal warrior appeared, mockingly declaring they would become food for the insects they had offended. Yang repeated his sand attack, but the blow only shaved 11 health from the man. The warrior's stats were revealed. Level 10, with 40 strength and 20 defense. His power rivaled that of a dungeon boss. The group doubted they could win, but Kyo wasn't fazed, and wondered if this world's rules worked differently. Believing them harmless, the warrior readied his strike, expecting little damage in return. Yet a single punch from Kyo ripped away 121 health, making the warrior stagger in shock. Enraged that a mere human had hurt him, he invoked his insect bite skill. His strength and defense surged dramatically. He boasted that now nothing could harm him. Still, Kyo remained unimpressed. After a flurry of humiliating strikes to the face, the warrior crumpled to the ground, clinging to only 23 health. Forced to yield, he revealed the truth about the sacrifices and the priestess. He confessed their pact with the insects, offering victims each full moon while the queen dwelled within the green stone. That was why the outsiders had been healed, to prepare them as offerings. Xiao pressed him further, asking why the girl Dong had called the place by another name. The warrior swore ignorance. He insisted only one Dong lived here, their matriarch. At first, Kyo let him leave in thanks for cooperating. But then, he decided to finish him anyway, seizing the skill point. Leveling up, he gained the Sage's Protection, an artifact that negated one fatal blow. Such an S-rank relic could change any battle. Yet they now faced a dilemma. Villagers would soon notice the warrior's absence, and confronting the matriarch directly would be perilous. The mission required them to eliminate the insects, not necessarily fight the villagers. So their best option was to act before the matriarch discovered their plan. They pressed forward. On the ground, they stumbled upon the corpses of the girl's supposed parents, realizing they had been illusions. That explained the family's strange behavior. It proved not everyone here was what they seemed. Pooling their attacks, they targeted the stone that housed the queen. Their combined assault detonated in a violent blast. When the smoke cleared, a vast crater yawned before them. That should have ended it. But the mission remained incomplete. A chilling voice spoke from behind, criticizing their insolence. If they were here, it meant her warrior had already fallen. Kyo asked if she was Shudong, the matriarch. She asked if he disliked her current form and offered to take the shape of a child again. Appearing once more as a little girl, she teased, asking which form he preferred. Her intent had been to make him her companion, but since he had slaughtered so many insects, that was no longer possible. Kyo demanded to know why she would treat members of her own tribe that way. To her, even her parents were nothing but useless, rebellious pests. As an orphan, Kyo burned with fury at such words. She noticed his rage and mocked him, telling him he would see his family soon enough. At her command, a swarm of insects surged forth to devour him. The ravenous horde swirled around Kyo. The fire mage shouted that they must help, hurling flames at the swarm. But before the blast landed, the same tribal warrior reappeared, blocking them. He roared that they must face him, not interfere with the matriarch. Now level 10 with 50 strength, 30 defense, and 30 agility, he seemed unstoppable. Meanwhile, insects gnawed at Kyo's health. If only his agility and defense matched his monstrous strength, the fight would be easier. He considered using the Brave Heart talent, but decided to hold back, relying instead on the Sage's Protection if death struck. Closing in, the matriarch sneered that he seemed eager to become insect food, but she hadn't expected what followed. One mighty strike from Kyo tore a hole through her body, though she didn't fall. Her stats became visible. 30 strength, 20 defense, 50 agility at level 10. She was a rare NPC. Her numbers weren't high, so her rarity had to come from something else. She lamented the wound, but suddenly her agility shot up by 8. Kyo steadied himself for her retaliation. Her counterattack was vicious. Before he even realized it, her hand pierced his chest. The sudden burst of speed left him with only 9 health. She smirked, planning to wear his skin as a trophy. Yang panicked at the sight, seeing his friend on the brink of death. In that instant, the warrior lunged again, nearly landing a killing blow on Yang. They couldn't afford to ignore him any longer. Yang cast his sand spell again. The warrior mocked him, saying attacks from fat men did nothing. He laughed that it only tickled. But then the sand turned crimson and detonated, dealing 312 damage in a single blast. The warrior shriveled, his fat burned away by his own ability, leaving him lean and desperate. With his foe fallen, Yang ran to aid Kyo, who was distracted, marveling that his friend was suddenly thin. Even Yang was confused. His anger had surged, causing his body to shed weight and his spirit stat to skyrocket to nearly 300. Realizing this, he seized the matriarch, shouting for Kyo to order one more strike. But Yang knew it might kill him too. Kyo urged him to trust and act. Without wasting words, placing his faith in him, Yang prepared the spell. The matriarch begged for mercy, pleading not to die there. The explosion engulfed them in searing light. The others gasped, fearing the worst. But the sage's protection activated, sparing Kyo. His bravery was rewarded. He unlocked a new talent. Strong contract ranked A. Each strength point now granted 10 health. This solved his greatest weakness, his low vitality. Yang rushed over, astonished. His friend had fallen and yet stood alive. But the victory was incomplete. The matriarch had dropped no loot, meaning she wasn't finished. From the smoke, she stepped forth again, sneering that they had proven troublesome. Now, she vowed, they would behold her true form. Her hybrid transformation erupted. Level 15, with 130 strength, 100 agility, and formidable defenses. Kyo urged Yang to unleash the spell once more, but his spirit had plummeted to only 48 points. A system alert blared that the boss had exceeded expectations in power, recommending immediate retreat due to the overwhelming danger. Yang wanted to escape, but Chao didn't even entertain the thought. Again, the system urged withdrawal, suggesting they restart the custom world. Chao reminded Yang that the director had commanded them to complete it, and today was the day they would succeed. The matriarch seemed to enjoy his defiance. Believing she would end them swiftly, she clashed with him in a brutal exchange where both suffered heavy losses. Blow after blow landed, and though she fought hard, she took far more damage than she delivered. Now she stared at him, bewildered, wondering what sort of creature he was. He should have been dead already. Even at level 8, he was far beyond what she expected, his presence closer to that of a dungeon boss. No ordinary mage should have possessed such raw power. In the middle of their duel, she called for a halt and demanded to know if Baiji had sent him. It could only be him, she muttered, claiming Baiji was her creator, though Chao had no idea who that was. With his staff, Chao struck again, inflicting 213 damage. The mention of Baiji rattled her deeply. She whispered that it couldn't be true, that he couldn't bear that name, or defeat her in combat. When the fight ended, Chao earned 15 skill points and 75 experience, leveling up once more as the system tallied rewards. Zhuan and Yuan received E rank, Long gained F, Yang earned A, while Chao was awarded S. With this, Chao had reached level 10, nearly advanced enough to challenge dungeons alone. He also received a B rank item for level 11, boosting health by 800 points. In addition, he obtained a mysterious cube infused with sealed power. The artifact linked itself to Chao, enabling him to copy abilities from others as long as they weren't more than 10 levels above him. Yet one of its abilities remained locked. If the rest was this valuable, the hidden power must be extraordinary. A portal appeared, and the guide congratulated them for clearing the cave of 10,000 poisons. As a bonus, she raised their spirit attribute by 20%. It was a generous prize, though 20% of nothing remained nothing. The others thanked Chao, acknowledging that he alone had ensured their survival. Asked which university he intended to attend, he replied, Jingdu. On hearing this, they decided to go there too. The guide looked pleased with their determination. At level 10, Chao's strength stood at 202, with 4,040 total health thanks to his gear. And that figure didn't even account for the skills he had stacked. Back at the academy, fellow students greeted them with amazement. Mefe couldn't believe Quay had reached level 10 already. In the mage realm, monsters were rarer, making advancement slow and difficult. The girls, however, were stunned that the slim boy was actually Yang. He looked like a different person. Yang himself longed to regain his lost weight, uncomfortable with his lean frame in the other world. With their positions already secured, some wondered if they still needed to sit for the exam. After all, exam day was an important event, gathering the best students with an A-rank item as the prize for the winner. Dafa declared he would compete and claim first place among warriors. His father had told him that this year's champion would even receive an S-rank item. With such a reward, Quay resolved to win. But unseen spies watched him, assuming he was weak because his level was only 10. They descended and blocked his way. Unaware of who they were, Quay asked if they needed something. They demanded to know if he was the one who had slain Sundong in the Cave of 10,000 Poisons. Both were assassins, though weaker than him. They might be linked to Baizi, whose name the matriarch had mentioned. Regretting not interrogating her, he lied, giving his name as Mafia and insisting they had mistaken him for someone else. One assassin apologized politely, but the other scoffed, calling him a fool. They would capture him anyway in case he was a mage. In an instant, both vanished from sight. Still, Quay showed no hint of surprise. The two struck simultaneously. He didn't even bother to dodge, making his deception obvious. Before they realized it, Quay had already launched a counterattack at the first. One blow stripped 197 health from the man. The second assassin realized this was no ordinary opponent. He himself couldn't inflict that much on his comrade. This was no mage. Facing the survivor, Quay asked if he was ready for round 2. Panicking, the man begged forgiveness, swearing he had confused him with someone else. He admitted he was nothing but a pawn in a group ranked below 7,000, and pleaded for the matter to end there. He warned that a level 18 Istasan among the top 7,000 showed their organization's terrifying strength. If Quay didn't let them go, retaliation would be far worse. Quay allowed them to leave, wishing them luck in finding their target, though they declined his offer of help. He later learned Baizi was a sacred white beast with horns, revered for driving demons from the land. Searching online, he found no trace of this mysterious organization. He knew his identity would soon be revealed, and with his current power he couldn't yet protect himself. His best chance was to sit the exam and head to Jingdu. The university's director was reputedly the strongest swordsman alive, and that presence alone gave him hope of safety. If even the university wasn't secure, nowhere would be. He turned his focus back to the magic cube and its hidden abilities. Perhaps it was an artifact connecting different worlds, which explained why it had been entrusted to him. The mystery raised more questions than it solved, and Quay's thoughts drifted to his parents. Meanwhile, high atop a tower, the leader of the assassins reviewed their report. They admitted their intelligence had been flawed and that the target was far stronger than expected, making their findings worthless. For now, they would ignore her death, as more pressing matters loomed in the city. Days later, Quay sought out the university director, hoping he knew something about the cube. The director explained it had been discovered in a special world and remained sealed, but wondered aloud if it could be unlocked. He revealed it required a password, but if that failed, the key of all locks could open it without harm. The seal itself wasn't particularly powerful. Hearing this, Quay asked where the artifact could be found. The answer was in the Machine Kingdom, but he was warned it was an open-world zone filled with rival players. In that realm, humans and machines had once waged war after the machines gained awareness. Eventually, a peace treaty was signed, and the land where Quay would go belonged to humans. To acquire the key, he would need a mission from Hu Jun, lord of that region. The real challenge was locating him. Just then, an elderly man shuffled past, preoccupied with a math problem. He bumped into a much larger man. Fallen to the ground, he stammered apologies. The younger man mocked him, claiming he must stumble on purpose or be unable to walk properly. Feigning injury, he demanded compensation. He pressed the old man to pay him off. Quay intervened, remarking that extorting the elderly in broad daylight took twisted courage. The thug sneered, telling Quay to stay out of it unless he intended to cover the cost. But justice would not be denied. Quay's fist connected before the thug realized it, launching him far through the air. His partner froze, paralyzed with fear. Trembling, he apologized, promising they would leave quietly without revenge. They fled in panic, leaving the old man to regain his composure. Quay asked if he was unharmed, but the man said he had little money to repay kindness. Quay waved it off, saying it wasn't in his nature to accept payment. The old man thanked him, regretting his inability to compensate. Kuei explained he sought the lord of the region, needing the key of all locks, which he'd heard could be obtained from him. The old man said fortune smiled on him, for he could provide help. Still, he warned the task would not be easy. Kuei answered that he had used only a fraction of his power and remained confident of success. Elsewhere, the two thugs whispered about whether the Lord of the Lands had discovered his target. One admitted he couldn't say, but declared that the player they met was the strongest opponent he had ever faced. A young woman remarked that Kuei was still lecturing and insisted he must be delivered to her no matter the means. The man bowed and promised to carry out Lady Mon's command. After walking for a while, the old man pointed out that the Lord of the Lands resided in the massive estate ahead, and Kuei expressed his gratitude. The residence was a vast and awe-inspiring mansion, and Kuei wondered how the elderly man roamed through it as if it were his own. When he turned to ask, the old man had already vanished. Left alone, Kuei resolved to continue searching for him to acquire the item. Pushing open the doors, he entered a magnificent hall. Seated on what resembled a throne was the same old man, flanked by the two who had harassed him earlier. He revealed himself as the Lord of the City of Machines, and those two were, in fact, his most formidable guardians. Yet he had orchestrated that earlier encounter to identify someone who surpassed even their strength, greater than the defenders of his city. At this moment, that individual was Kuei. If Kuei agreed to help him, he would reward him with the key of all locks. Thus, a secret mission commenced. The Lord explained he would present his research at a seminar the next day, certain that robots seeking to steal it would attack. Kuei assumed he wanted protection, but the Lord clarified that wasn't it. He wished for him to defeat the two enemies, to destroy both the entity and its heart. Since they were only machines, Kuei accepted. The following day, the old man began his lecture. He spoke of how advances in technology had allowed mankind to better decipher the mysteries of nature. Though much about digitizing life remained uncertain, artificial intelligence was advancing toward that goal. Still, reproduction posed a major hurdle. His question was whether a machine could truly evolve, whether it could grow. Kuei understood nothing of the discussion, merely waiting for the mechanical enemies to appear. Above, cracks spread across a glass ceiling. From the opening, a robot descended. It proclaimed that metal surpassed flesh and bone, urging the professor to accept this truth. The moment it landed, security forces rushed forward. One guard, introducing himself as Scram, told the intruder he did not belong there. The machine gave no answer. In an instant, it vanished, only to reappear and strike him viciously in the stomach. The other guards froze, powerless to intervene. Within moments, the robot dispatched them all. Observing calmly, Kuei remarked that the display was disgraceful. The old man explained they were here for him, and that this battle would take them into the kingdom of machines. With that declaration, he staked everything on Kuei. Scram declared superiority, boasting that his mechanical body surpassed any living one. From the ceiling breach, another figure descended. It was the Queen of Machines, demanding the professor return with her. He agreed only if she commanded her forces to cease. Instead, she bound him with chains, telling him obedience earlier would have spared him this. Another machine told Lady Mon to depart, as he intended to enjoy himself longer. In a flash, she vanished with the professor. Left behind, Kuei addressed Scram, reminding him of his earlier boast about having the strongest body. Scram replied that humans could never comprehend the beauty of mechanical perfection. Kuei decided to strike first. The robot countered with an invitation for him to join the mechanical revolution and gain an augmented body. Kuei's first punch landed, ripping away 306 of Scram's health. Though Scram's stats were impressive, they were meaningless against Kuei. Badly damaged, Scram realized he was outmatched. Kuei thanked him for the offer, but said he had no need for it. Scram still refused to believe a human had breached his armored shell. He demanded to know how, and Kuei answered simply that he had clenched his fist and struck. The truth was that Kuei carried the ancient sacred body of humanity. Driving his foot down, Kuei pinned the robot to the ground. Another blow followed, and he ordered Scram to guide him to the Machine Kingdom or be reduced to junk. Defeated, Scram led the way toward the Queen's domain. He assumed the professor had allowed himself to be taken to direct Kuei toward the heart's location. But deep inside, Scram was shaken by the young man's power, unable to fathom why the Queen would permit his presence. With doubts swirling, they pressed on. In the Machine Kingdom, the Queen kept the professor captive. She apologized for bringing him there so harshly. He declared he would never betray mankind to support her cause. But she urged him to reconsider, asking him to look around. Before them stood something being constructed, refined piece by piece. It was the very heart he had spoken of. Neither fully human nor purely machine, It was a hybrid beyond the definition of robot. She called the process ascension, claiming that flesh was frail while metal was eternal. She insisted it was time for the professor to embrace this glorious evolution, but he denounced her as a traitor who had abandoned her humanity. Enraged, she demanded he repeat what he had just called her. Suddenly, several people were hurled down from above as she told him to watch closely. They screamed desperately as they were torn apart, mechanical arms extended, ripping into them and feeding their remains to the hybrid heart. Meanwhile, Cao had already entered the machine city, confronted by swarms of mechanical foes. They regarded him as an intruder. He fought them off, finding them weak but still worth attribute gains. The unexpected benefit pleased him greatly. Eventually, none of the robots around him remained intact. The professor, horrified by the slaughter, cried out that the queen was a monster. She retorted that his fury would change nothing. She explained that the heart, called Marta, was in fact a failure. It had been designed to grow naturally, like an organism. Instead, it mutated into a ravenous creature that devoured flesh endlessly. What began with a single victim had spiraled out of control, and now its hunger knew no limit. She offered the professor two paths: attempt to resolve it or ignore it, while they continued feeding it with human lives. She added there was only one person who could intervene: Cao. At that moment, a robot rushed in to report that a human with the ancestral sacred body had invaded. The queen asked if this was the same figure her scout had previously mentioned. Before the reply came, a slab of metal hurtled into the chamber. Cao had arrived. At last, the one destined to decide everything stood before them. The queen sought confirmation that this was the bearer of the ancestral body. She commended Cao for reaching her domain, pointing out that the warrior he had defeated was among her finest. She admitted she never expected one of her strongest Mon, a rare level 15 NPC with high stats, to fall to a human. Cao looked her in the eyes and mocked, asking if it was humiliating for her champion to fall to a bearer of the ancestral body, and whether she intended to avenge him while ignoring her guard who charged forward. Cao welcomed this, another chance to harvest easy points. With a single blow, he destroyed the first guard. The second followed, dismantled with equal ease. His mortal flesh proved superior to the queen's engineered warriors. The queen, stunned, conceded the ancestral body might truly exist, and mused that if she altered him, he could surpass all others. He would become the mightiest warrior in the world. Meanwhile, Cao asked the professor if he was unharmed. The professor rose and directed him to look toward a certain spot. There lay the mechanical heart, level 15 without listed attributes, yet clearly undergoing a transformation. He added that humans were being sacrificed to feed the machine. Upon seeing it, he resolved to shatter the machine even without the professor's request. At that instant, the queen believed their only task was to eliminate the one carrying the ancestral body. She urged him to cast aside his fragile flesh and embrace the new evolution. He gave no response, leaving her to wonder what his next move would be. Before she could register it, he had already sped past her. In moments, he stood before the heart, poised to destroy it. The queen, now frantic, pleaded desperately for him to spare Marta. Her appeals were useless. His fist crashed squarely against the heart. Realizing the danger, she hurled herself forward to block him before he could finish. Noticing her advance, he braced for action. He warned her not to interfere. Her system screamed alarms, demanding she retreat immediately as the threat level was overwhelming. Yet she was still struck, losing 288 points of health. The blow's intensity sent her smashing through the structures behind her. Despite the heavy damage, she still possessed vast reserves of vitality. Confronted with his immense strength, she knew she had to bring him into her cause within the machine kingdom. Undistracted, Cao turned once again to the heart. His fists hammered it repeatedly, fueled by rage for what it had done to humans. All he desired was for it to break apart quickly. After relentless blows, the heart burst into fragments. From its destruction, he gained 3 attribute points and 100 experience. The chamber was now drenched in a thick crimson fluid, splattered everywhere like pulp. The queen seethed, for Marta had been the last hope of her machines. But Cao thought only of the countless human lives wasted. He was clearly human at heart, though convinced of his strength like a machine, an unyielding lion. Regardless, what the queen desired most was to converse with him. She admitted that though he was powerful, his strength was insignificant in the greater scale. She promised that the true queen would pardon all his actions if he agreed to stand with her. Through that choice, he could redeem himself and erase his mistakes. Cao assumed that Mandy was the ruler of the machines, the very queen herself. The professor nearby warned him not to fall for the deception. But Cao rejected the idea of mechanical evolution. He valued his human body too much. Watching him, Mandy remained convinced this attitude would change once he met the real queen. Chow himself longed for that meeting, and so Mande offered to guide him deeper. They walked through endless metallic corridors. Mande directed him carefully along the correct path. With a subtle motion, he opened his palm and released a tiny machine. It hovered silently, positioning itself at the back of Cow's neck. This minuscule construct had the ability to infect a person, converting flesh into machinery. The mosquito-like device locked into place. Mande, confident, believed success was certain and that the queen would reward him. Preparing its drill, it was ready to pierce him. But the slightest prick alerted Chow, who crushed it instantly. Realizing the trick, he turned on Mande with fury. Mande tried to feign innocence, but before he could utter a word, Chow had already struck. The hit was brutal, though Mande fought to remain upright. Chow evaluated his strength. NPCs at level 15 were not simple opponents. Mande, enraged, demanded to know if he truly refused to meet the queen. Having been attacked, Cao retaliated, reasoning the queen must be close by. If that was the case, Mandy's guidance was no longer necessary. Accepting the fight, Mandy swore to bring him to the queen, even if it meant delivering only his remains. Confident she would forge him a new body, Mande swung his mechanical fist at Cao, but Cao countered with his own strike. The clash accomplished nothing. Mandy's blows had no effect whatsoever. The robot grew more fascinated with the resilience of the ancestral body. Seizing Mandy's arm, Cao mocked. "Scrap doesn't need to eat." He slammed him again, draining more of his health. Mandy was trapped, unable to react. Cao lowered his head, preparing to ram him. The headbutt landed, fracturing Mandy's face. The sheer force launched him into a wall, shattering it apart. What remained afterward revealed his purely robotic form. With nearly no vitality left, he admitted he had underestimated the human. Now he would unveil what he should have revealed at the start. His grotesque form repulsed Cao, who would rather face death than ever become such a thing. The machine lunged with a final desperate strike, but Cao braced with his own fist. The collision produced a devastating critical hit. Cao advanced to a new level, earning 25 attribute points. At last, he had stepped into the initial stage. It was overdue, but with this, the mission ended and he claimed the key of all locks. Yet he still wished to seek out the queen, hoping she might possess something valuable. To enter the next pavilion, a code was needed. He tried several combinations, all in vain. If he had realized sooner, Mandy might still be alive, but now he required someone else who knew the password. On the other side, the queen already awaited him. She remembered their previous encounters and wondered why he would still seek her after completing his mission. The gate splintered apart into countless shards. When uncertainty lingers, violence may not be the question, but it is always the answer. On the throne sat what looked like an ordinary young girl. Cao asked what she was doing in such a place. She quickly recognized him as unusual, strange in some way. When she offered no reply, he pressed, asking if she could speak and if she had a name. At last, she introduced herself as the Queen of the Machine Kingdom. This revelation startled him, an epic-level NPC, with unlisted attributes and 100,000 health points. Whatever confidence he carried vanished instantly. With such strength, she could dominate an A-rank world with ease. Recognizing the danger, he bowed apologetically, claiming he had taken a wrong path and would depart at once. But as he turned away, chains erupted from her body. He was ensnared, unable to resist. The queen drew him closer, her sheer power holding him immobile. She reassured him not to fear, promising no harm. Placing her hand upon his head, she began absorbing his memories. Through them, she glimpsed the outer world. She already knew her reality was false. A single virtual world among many, doomed to reset repeatedly, restoring everything as before. Yet if she remained within this chamber, the reset would not touch her. She confessed she could no longer count how many cycles had passed, but now, for the first time, someone had reached her, and she refused to squander it. The young man asked if she had read through his memories, but she replied that it had been an exchange. He wasn't shocked that her level stood so high. After hearing this, he asked if the queen desired to leave, and she confirmed it. Yet she added that she could end him easily, since he was nothing more than a level 11 human unable to challenge this world's laws. Still, she explained there was no need to break any of the rules. She pressed her hand firmly against his chest. Cao was caught off guard, uncertain what she was attempting. She withdrew an object from within him, saying they could employ the laws of the other world he had spoken about. It was revealed as the Queen's true heart, an S-rank artifact imbued with life itself. She intended for him to take it, for in time it would grow into another version of herself. Through players gathering such items, she could learn of the outside world. Cao questioned whether she feared what he might do once outside, but she explained she had seen nothing in his memories suggesting he ever broke a promise. What mattered more was her desire to know life beyond. This was no ordinary NPC, but one with awareness, yearning to touch the real world. The queen asked if he had chosen, and the youth admitted he had no other path. Grateful, she thanked him and released him. With the mission completed, the system graded him at A rank, rewarding him with a B rank spellbook, a C rank item, additional experience, and 5 attribute points. The mechanical knuckle boosted his chance of critical strikes by 30%. For someone who relied on fists, that was quite a boon. His next step was to deliver the cube to the director. He was at last transported outside. In the director's office, he called for him but was puzzled to find the place empty. Regardless, since he had the key, he decided to attempt unlocking the cube himself. He slid the key into the seal that bound the cube. Sparks of lightning erupted, accompanied by a bluish glow as the object began to stir. From it appeared a sword of unknown properties, clearly an evolved artifact. This was the gift left for him, though he didn't understand why it was a weapon, or why it seemed to lack defined attributes. It wasn't an ideal reward for him, given that he was a mage. The director finally entered, and Kyo admitted to having opened the cube. The director dismissed that, saying it was irrelevant. What mattered was that the boy needed to leave immediately, or he would miss exam day. It took him a moment to grasp that the exam was about to start. In the examination hall, numerous students had gathered. Some pressed the examiners to begin without delay, but Yang told them to wait, since one participant had yet to arrive. The agitators scoffed, claiming it hardly mattered, assuming the absent student was weak and untalented. Yang bristled at the insult and demanded the man repeat his words. The arrogant one then declared it was tradition that first place always came from his university, and that this year would be no exception. He said the test meant little since the true victor was already decided, and if the tardy student hadn't arrived, it was surely due to fear. In response, Yang asserted his friend could flatten them all with a single punch. Provoked, the loudmouth sneered that the little one could try, but he'd devour him like a piece of bread. Amid the boasting, a girl wondered aloud where Chao had gotten to. Mifei stepped forward, declaring that Chao was the only one capable of challenging him. Still, even as he said it, worry gnawed at him over his friend's absence. Meanwhile, Chao was sprinting toward the exam hall, painfully aware of his lateness. One examiner asked whether all candidates from the 4th university were present. It was his last chance to arrive and secure entry. From a distance, he shouted his presence, bringing relief to his companions. He had shown up just in time. The envious ones muttered in frustration that an unknown student had kept them waiting. One tried to downplay the delay, insisting it hadn't truly mattered, while others insisted they needed to hurry and secure the highest spots. Chao asked who these people thought they were, and Yang explained they came from the 1st university. One of them turned red with anger at the disrespect and swore he'd crush Chao during the trials. Chao shrugged them off, unimpressed, surprised that the so-called elite were so thin-skinned. Enraged, the most offended one nearly lost control, but another student behind him called his attention, reminding him their real goal was first place, not petty squabbles. That put the fool back in line. Having stirred the crowd, they left as quickly as they had started trouble. With everyone present, the exam was ready to commence. The chief examiner stepped forward, introducing himself as Jin Tong. He explained the exam would follow a point system. Each victory earned 2 points, including consecutive wins. Each defeat subtracted a point, though never more than one consecutively. After the first round, the top 10 would face one another to decide the strongest. When asked if the candidates understood, they all affirmed. From the stands, parents shouted encouragement to their children. In the arena, Chao considered how the rules resembled standard dueling formats. Health could not drop below 1, ensuring no one would die. That meant he could fight without holding anything back. Stillman asked Long Xiao who he believed would triumph. As last year's champion, Long Xiao naturally assumed victory would go to someone from their own university. For Chao's first match, his opponent would be Long Machin from the 1st university. Chao regarded him calmly, while the clown was ecstatic at facing him right away. Chao remarked that his name sounded amusing, making a joke about its pronunciation. That comment enraged the clown, who vowed to smash his teeth in. The referee asked if both were prepared, and each confirmed. It was time for introductions, but they dismissed the formalities, immediately trading punches. Long declared himself a level 9 mage wielding electrical powers. Chao, in contrast, revealed he was a level 11 necromancer. Hearing this, the clown realized the danger. His opponent was already at level 11 and had entered the initial stage. Even the referee was surprised at a candidate achieving that level before the exams. With introductions over, the real fight began. Confident, the clown summoned electricity, sure it would overwhelm the undead. Lightning started crackling around him. Chow watched without the slightest concern. A vast dome of electricity formed around the clown. Only about 1 in 10 possessed electric affinity, making his talent rare. Yet to the audience, it looked as if he were merely hiding behind a barrier. They doubted any opponent could break through it. Inside, the clown mocked, inviting the necromancer to test him. But he was confused by the absence of Chow's staff. One elder asked the director if this was truly the youth to whom Jingyu University would offer admission without hesitation, since he looked uninterested in fighting. He seemed too arrogant, and if he kept it up, he'd fall quickly. But the director reminded them this same boy had once blasted a professor across a room with a single strike. In the audience, teachers were eager to witness a clash between the undead and lightning. So far, neither side had gone on the offensive. Nevertheless, the clown grew uneasy. Chow advanced slowly, leaving the mage baffled as to why no summons had appeared. Then Chow stepped directly into the lightning dome, suffering no damage. The clown reeled in shock. This shouldn't have been possible. Necromancers were supposed to be fragile, yet this one shrugged off attacks as if they were nothing. The spectators wondered aloud if these two were even mages at all, since one of them seemed reckless. As he closed the distance, Chow slipped on his knuckle dusters. It was time to shatter some teeth and see how his new gear performed in action. Realizing the strike was coming, the mage suddenly felt his undergarments turn unbearably heavy. The critical blow drained more health than he could withstand, hurling his body across the arena and demolishing everything in its path. If not for the duel's protective rules, he would have been reduced to a bloody stain. Knowing how severe the hit was, Chow told the mage he now owed him only 5 lives. The audience sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by what they had seen. How could a necromancer, assumed to be frail, deliver such sheer physical destruction? One of the elders wanted answers from the director about how something like this was possible. That single punch had inflicted over 1,000 points of damage. But the director brushed it off, claiming there was nothing strange about a necromancer being somewhat strong. Chow had trained from a young age and possessed multiple talents. Last year's champion was eager to gauge how skilled he truly was with magic. Just then, a young messenger hurried to a superior. He breathlessly announced that Long had been flattened with 1 strike by a student from the 4th university. The superior, however, already knew. The boy was indeed strong, but the man reminded them first place would still belong to their university. The spectators couldn't stop talking about Chow's absurd strength. They doubted he was even a mage. After securing his win, Chow thanked everyone who had cheered him on. In the arena, a man approached and asked Chow to come with him. Chow demanded a reason. Someone had accused him of cheating, and the officials needed to test him. Chow was outraged. He couldn't believe that excelling made him a suspect. The man pressed further, asking how a mage could possess such brute force. Chow simply replied that strength was natural for him. The answer wasn't convincing, so they escorted him away. As he was led out, whispers spread through the crowd that perhaps he really had cheated. Even an elder questioned if Sulugui's pupil was dishonest, though he urged patience before passing judgment. Ida Mufai also wondered aloud if Chow cheated, but his colleague rebuked him. The jealous group gloated, insisting the investigation would expose Chow as a fraud. Yang countered, saying they would see the truth once Chow returned. The mockers scoffed, claiming his friend would never come back. Before Chow, a glowing yellow portal appeared. The official instructed him to step inside for testing. As he entered, Chow remarked that true genius always attracted doubt. The examination was run, and no irregularities appeared. The man demanded a second round of testing. Once again, Chow submitted, and again no signs of anomaly were found. Unsatisfied, the official ordered technicians to inspect the equipment for faults. While waiting, the specialists carefully checked the device. They confirmed it was in perfect working order, without a single defect. This meant Chow really could land a 1,000 damage punch. No mage in history had ever achieved that. Next came a drug screening. If he passed, he could rejoin the competition. Meanwhile, the second round of matches had begun. One contestant insisted Chow wouldn't return, and that if time expired, he would be disqualified. Inside the arena, students prepared for their bouts. A mage waited impatiently for his missing opponent. He asked a professor, who confirmed that if the rival didn't arrive, the match would end in automatic victory. The missing fighter was none other than the necromancer, and murmurs spread that his absence meant he was guilty. In reality, Chow was stuck in the restroom. An official accompanied him, required to witness the urine test. Closing the stall door, Chow joked that he feared scaring the man. The official insisted he was a professional and could handle it. Both remained inside the stall. When they came out, the man looked traumatized by what he had witnessed. He returned to his supervisor and reported that Chow's results were completely clean. That cleared him to resume the exam. Looking over his records, the supervisor realized he was the son of Chow Anking. Such lineage suggested he was destined to surprise many people. Yang worried that his friend might still be expelled. The envious group sneered, claiming he was already gone, quietly eliminated. The girl pointed out the investigation only happened because someone had filed a report, likely them. But she admitted she had no proof, and if he truly cheated, the report would be justified. After all, damage that outrageous naturally raised suspicion. Yang maintained his confidence in his friend, believing firmly that Chow would return. The jealous ones mocked them as delusional, insisting there was no chance he'd come back. Mafai retorted that their obsession with first place was obvious, but their schemes wouldn't succeed. Even without Chow, he was determined to fight for victory. Just then, the girl announced that Chow had returned. Having passed every test, he walked back toward the arena just as the referee prepared to declare a default win. Chow called out for him to wait. Despite the delay, both contestants were present so the match could begin. As before, Chow introduced himself politely. Seeing him back, the spectators began to accept that he hadn't cheated and really did wield such terrifying strength. The jealous group fell silent, forced to swallow their earlier words. In the arena, his opponent declared introductions unnecessary. Now that Chow had arrived, he was ready to act. But before the fight even started, the opponent surrendered. He refused to risk a punch capable of inflicting 1,000 points of damage. Chow pursued him, trying to press the match, astonishing the referee, who nonetheless awarded him extra points. With that surrender, his total climbed to 5 points. His friends rushed over to congratulate him. Meanwhile, the envious clique fumed at headquarters, upset that the necromancer had returned and unsure what else to try. Reporting him had been only a stalling tactic. Since he hadn't cheated, his return was inevitable. But they still had other tricks planned to get him removed. They were determined no one would steal first place from them. Soon, Chow's next battle began. Just like before, his opponent conceded immediately. Chow grew irritated, itching for a real fight. But his rival insisted he had no desire to experience 1,000 damage strike. The same thing happened again in the 4th round, to Chow's annoyance. This pattern continued until the 8th match. Chow, who longed for a proper battle, was disappointed by the repeated forfeits. If things kept going this way, he would enter the 2nd stage with a flawless score. Meanwhile, the jealous group planned to arrange for him to face a professor from the 2nd Academy in the 9th bout. Whether she went along with their scheme remained to be seen. All they needed was for the duel to begin. Her choice would decide the outcome, and so the 9th round commenced. Professor Suarang stepped into the arena to face Chow. The crowd erupted, marveling at her striking beauty. In the arena, it was time for formal introductions. She declared herself an ice mage of level 11. Among the directors, an elder commented that Chow finally faced a serious challenge, though Su argued that they still had no idea of his true capabilities. Chow introduced himself again as a level 11 necromancer. As soon as the introductions ended, her staff flared with icy brilliance. Chow was caught off guard, since until now she hadn't shown the slightest hint of surrender. Calm and steady, she explained there was no reason to retreat at this point. This thrilled Chow. It was the first time someone hadn't folded after discovering his true power. Among the spectators, murmurs of disapproval spread, assuming he would take advantage of such a beautiful woman. In response to the jeers, he declared he wouldn't unleash his full strength against someone so stunning. He then revealed the weapon he had obtained from the magic cube. Its strangeness left the referee doubting whether Chow was really a necromancer. The professor, meanwhile, grew uneasy, never having seen a mage fight in such a way. With spear in hand, Chow advanced to strike. She conjured a barrier of ice as her defense. Columns of frost rose from the floor, seeking to trap him. But with a simple sweep of his spear, the entire structure shattered. Feeling his presence closing in, she realized she couldn't survive if he reached melee range. Still, she trusted that her spells could at least restrain him for a short while. Chow lunged forward, trying to close the distance for direct combat. The professor had anticipated this, waiting for him to leave the ground. She remarked that he was powerful, but too arrogant, and that his streak was about to end. Before his feet could touch down, she had already surrounded him with her ice. His body was quickly entombed in frost. In moments, he was sealed inside a massive block of ice, completely immobilized. The crowd praised her cleverness, declaring that a professor's tactics naturally outshone a student's. Most of the directors assumed the match was settled, but Sue urged them to watch carefully. The professor asked the referee if she had won, but he told her to look more closely at her opponent. Chow's health was steadily dropping, yet his life bar had not hit 0, so she cautiously approached the frozen block. As she neared, his face became visible through the ice. She advised him to yield, insisting the match was hers, but through the biting cold, he stubbornly refused. To her, he was only prolonging needless suffering, and soon his health would deplete entirely. But Chow calculated that with his current vitality, it would take a while. Straining against the prison, cracks splintered across the ice. She quickly attempted to strengthen the ice, piling on more layers to restrain him. Though he was encased again, she realized that breaking it earlier meant his physical power was far beyond normal. Even as she tried, he forced his head free once more, wondering how much mana she had left. Her reserves were almost gone, while his life bar still glowed. With nothing left to sustain the spell, Chow finally shattered his frozen cage. With her mana drained, she could do nothing but stare in disbelief at his escape. Now free, and with her magic spent, Chow aimed his spear at her. He courteously offered her a chance to surrender, but she refused. He swung with the flat of his blade inches from her head. The impact launched her through the air, inflicting 260 points of damage. The audience gasped at the ferocity of the blow. Chow, however, ignored their outrage. This was, after all, a tournament. The duel ended, with Chow declared the victor of the round. The directors were dumbfounded, while Sue proclaimed that no one could stop him from becoming this year's champion. A student hurried to assist the professor, noting that despite her loss, her points secured her place in the next phase. What unsettled them most was the young necromancer who fought nothing like a mage, making a mockery of the exam. Chow bristled at the criticism. It wasn't his fault his close combat style gave him an overwhelming advantage. At the hideout of the jealous faction, they despaired at his undefeated advance into the second stage. Chow had crushed every match and moved forward unscathed. Their leader lashed out, calling the professor worthless, vowing to handle the matter himself. A student asked the professor her thoughts, pointing out that Chow's power was far beyond ordinary. She admitted she had seen the schedule. Chow wasn't supposed to be her opponent. Someone had tampered with it. At first, she thought they wanted her removed, but realized the true target was Chow. She debated whether to warn him. In the end, she approached him, revealed what she knew, and urged caution, for whoever plotted against him would likely strike again. Instead of being unsettled, the revelation only fueled his eagerness to smash that schemer with a single blow. With Phase 1 finished, preparations began for the second stage. Those who passed gathered together. The arena battles were about to begin. 10 finalists remained, and the audience was torn between praising Chow as a future champion or condemning him as a fraud. Chow stepped in first, though inwardly he waited for the saboteur lurking in the shadows. Standing at the arena's center, the crowd speculated he meant to take on all 9 opponents at once. Then a trembling challenger entered behind him. The newcomer boasted that only a true genius could claim first place, and that he was one. Before finishing, he was struck across the face, losing 354 health points instantly. Chow corrected him with a smirk. That wasn't a genius. The audience erupted in astonishment. Many were now convinced this extraordinary youth would be the ultimate winner. His triumphs were so decisive that the crowd began chanting his name without hesitation. But Chow ignored the chants, keeping his focus on flushing out the one scheming against him. At last, the envious adversary stepped forward, mocking him as nothing more than a performer. He then offered Chow a deal, 5 million to step down. Chow blinked in confusion, prompting him to clarify. It was a bribe of 5 million if Chow withdrew. He reminded Chow that he was an orphan, left with no inheritance, and such money could change his life. Chow sneered, saying dreams couldn't be bought, at least not for so little. Intrigued, the man asked how much it would take. Chow replied he might consider it for 1 billion, or gladly accept 100 billion if offered. That figure was impossible, so the rival vowed to destroy him instead. Chow realized this must be the envious one, still baffled by such hatred. Like him, this rival was still in the early stage, but his class was Shadow Mage. It was the first time Chow had ever seen one. The clash was about to ignite. Chow's blood raced with excitement. At last, he could smash the envious one's smug face. With a single gesture, the rival summoned shadows. Dark figures began spreading across the arena. They solidified into humanoid forms as he stretched out his hand toward Chow. The duel of Necromancer versus Shadow Mage sent the crowd into frenzy. They cried out for Chow to summon undead, but he insisted he didn't need them. His own strength was enough. Gripping his spear, Chao stood ready for the shadows to approach. When the first entered his reach, he swung forcefully, but something felt off. These were different, denser, forged with bones of steel and iron. It was the first layer of the Envious One's trap. Yet Chao showed no fear, continuing to strike them down, helpless though they were against his blows. If this was their best, it wouldn't matter. Solid or not, they would still break. He felt a surge of determination, eager to test if his strength could truly cleave them. He raised his spear and unleashed a crushing vertical strike. Even with all his force, the blade couldn't slice through completely. Since his blade was already grazing its neck, he targeted what looked like its weakest point. Only 3 shadow constructs remained standing. The envious rival could hardly believe how much raw strength Chao displayed. If someone had called him a beast in human form, he would have agreed. And then another shadow lost its head to Chao's strike. In just moments, every shadow vanished. Now the shadow mage himself had to face the spear's edge. As Chao closed in, his opponent calmly explained that the summoned figures were not for fighting. They were offerings, and he began absorbing them into himself. Before he could finish, Chao's spear cut into the man's arm. Were it not for the tournament's restrictions, that wound would already have sent him to the afterlife. Yet Chao noticed something unusual happening to the mage's limb. The man admitted that Chao was the first ever to force him into consuming his shadows this way. Apparently, any direct attack on his body rebounded pain and damage back at the attacker. Producing a dagger, he warned that Chao would suffer even if he weren't struck directly. He stabbed himself with the short blade. The injury reflected, shaving 50 points from Chao's health. He repeated his offer. If Chao surrendered, he would still honor his earlier promise. But despite the danger, Chao stood firm and refused. The mage noticed a strike to the chest hadn't drained Chao's life completely. He kept cutting himself, remarking on Chao's stubbornness and insisting the pain to come wasn't his responsibility. Each blow sent a jolt of very real agony through Chao's body. Now the mage angled the blade toward a particularly cruel and sensitive target, utterly shameless. This horrified Chao, and he instinctively lashed out with his spear, slicing off the mage's arm. The enemy staggered back, once again attempting to merge with sacrificial shadows. Chao immediately suffered another 496 points of damage. In such a fight, raw attack power gave him no clear advantage. He had to discern the limits of this strange ability. Perhaps its secret lay within the aura of darkness cloaking him. At last, Chao pieced together how it worked and knew the next exchange would be decisive. Hiding one hand, the mage mocked him, daring Chao to try. Chao unleashed a strike that deliberately missed, but the displaced air revealed the hidden trick. He asked whether the mage really believed he wouldn't pierce through such a flimsy illusion. Now it came down to whether the mage could dodge. The man swore that if he did, he'd even call Chao father. Chao's fist was already drawn back, ready to smash into his face. Desperate, the mage summoned a powerful defensive spell. It absorbed the first impact of the blow. That confirmed Chao's suspicion. Otherwise, there'd have been no need to defend. Still, the mage insisted blocking was not the same as dodging. Chao didn't pause, raining down more strikes and carving away 125 points of health. The barrier, strong enough to repel ordinary bosses, cracked apart under his relentless strength. The mage could not accept that Chao exceeded even boss monsters. Calm and steady, Chao advanced, declaring the duel's end had come, but the shadow mage roared that he would finish it himself. Shadows swelled around him, more immense than before, enveloping his frame as his eyes turned a different hue. The transformation was so startling that it seized Chao's attention. In this form, even warriors with immense strength would crumble, and so should Chao. The mage was convinced victory, and first place in the exam, was finally his. Without giving him time, Chao darted in and caught him with a sudden kick. The blow sent him tumbling across the arena, smashing through the floor and stirring clouds of dust. Yet this time his body felt far sturdier. The fusion with shadows had hardened him greatly, and he bristled at having been caught off guard by that kick. When he came charging back, Chao prepared another punch. Their fists clashed with a thunderous crack, splitting the ground beneath them and unbalancing one of Chao's legs. Before he could land cleanly, a kick came rushing toward him. As he tried to descend, his ankle was seized midair. But Chao wasn't fazed by his opponent's force. He drove a clean punch into the mage's face from above. Once again, the rival was hurled aside, this time crashing into the arena floor hard enough to fracture it. The audience stared in disbelief. A mage duel had turned into raw brawling. 2 shadowy figures in the stands observed intently. They were assassins, now certain this wasn't Mufi but the very Chao they sought to deliver to Bai Zi. The shadow mage himself wondered how Chao could possibly match his strength and what hidden magic fueled it. But matching wasn't accurate. Chow was pressing the advantage. Inside, the mage realized his transformation was nearing its limit. With no choice, he invoked the forbidden devouring shadows technique. His director panicked, shouting at him not to use it under any condition. But the mage ignored him, driven to prove he surpassed his elder brother. That brother had been last year's champion, casting a suffocating shadow over him. Chow, uninterested in his family drama, only urged him to unleash the ability already. The mage attacked, sapping 141 health from Chow and vowing the fight was over. Yet Chow remained unbroken. He countered with a crushing strike to the mage's face. They traded furious blows at the arena's heart. One referee grew alarmed, asking if the overseer would truly allow this, but the reply was, "Just a little longer." A woman hidden among the staff spoke into a radio, ordering her squad to be ready to seize them both. The mage raged, unable to understand Chow's persistence, and Kuo echoed the disbelief. The man was stronger than any boss Chow had encountered. Still, the fight carried on, rage fueling one side, exhilaration the other. Yet one of them was close to exhaustion, and Chow landed a perfect punch to his foe's face. The shell of shadows around him shattered, leaving the mage to wonder if defeat had finally come. It appeared Chow had won, and the referee readied to announce the result. Then a sudden disturbance shook the arena, startling the organizers. The chief examiner yelled at someone, accusing them of courting disaster. Chow couldn't fathom what was unfolding, but the gleam in his eyes showed he sensed an intruder drawing near. A truck burst away from the exam grounds. Inside were several of the second phase candidates, including Chow himself. He awoke inside, confused about what had just transpired. Alongside him sat the defeated shadow mage Gu Su and the professor he had battled earlier. It became clear that the top contenders had been abducted. A cloaked woman approached, admitting she regretted collecting him in such a manner. Chow dryly replied that if this was her way of issuing invitations, she needed a better style. She assured him not to worry. She was Gu Si, leader of Baisi in this city. She explained that his abilities had forced her to resort to abduction. Yang and Ma Fei, also prisoners, had never heard of Baisi before, finding it audacious that the group acted during the exam itself. The professor warned of the immense consequences and demanded their immediate release. Gu Si replied they would indeed be freed once they reached their destination, and emphasized they had nothing to fear so long as they stayed calm. But if anyone dared attempt escape, they would personally learn whether God existed. The lingering question was why all of them had been taken. Just as universities seek out talented recruits, her organization also requires promising individuals. One of the captives rose angrily, declaring he had never heard of them and demanding his immediate release. Without hesitation, the woman drove her foot into his stomach, sending him sprawling. She insisted they had no real options. Once they saw what her group was capable of, they would join of their own accord. Refusal, she warned, meant certain death. If they possessed any sense, they would choose wisely. The authorities here were unlike ordinary police, and attempting to flee into the inner realm was out of the question. She turned and left, the heavy door shutting behind her. Not long before, the professors had fought fiercely, and the head organizer demanded to know the identity of these intruders. His arrows had pierced a young figure, only to reveal that the victim was one of the exam staff. Someone had infiltrated their ranks, but rescuing the abducted students was now the highest priority. Above all else, their safety mattered most. An archer of level 35. Few would have guessed the chief examiner himself wielded that title. He readied his bow, uncertain who the youth truly was, and the young man replied that his identity would remain secret. Arrows rained down toward the intruder, but the figure struck was only an illusion. While distracted, the chief examiner was hit. The youth mocked him, calling him reckless, a sure path to an early grave. The examiner burst upward, rubble scattering in every direction. The ground around them soon followed, heaving and splitting apart. As the haze lifted, something new emerged. The examiner finally tore free of his binds. 2 aides rushed over to check on him, and he reassured them he was unharmed, but urgently asked where the attackers had gone. They reported the escape of 10 students, whom they had failed to stop. Hearing this, his demand was immediate. Whose names were on the list? On learning which students were taken, his fury grew uncontrollable. 2 directors approached, noting that the captives were geniuses and likely not in immediate peril. The precision of the operation meant a formidable organization was behind it, and certainly not a minor one acting during an exam. Another aide arrived, reporting identical incidents in other cities. The examiner ordered a full inquiry, stressing the safety of the students above all. Inside the truck's container, Chow studied the unusual shackles holding them. A physical cultivator scoffed, saying such restraints should never have held him. He strained with all his strength, yet the chains would not budge. Chow, however, slipped out with ease, remarking on the poor workmanship of his own bindings, leaving the physical cultivator astonished. Gripping his spear, Chow offered to release the others. With swift cuts, he shattered their restraints. Only one remained bound, the envious rival. Relying on his own powers, he refused assistance. As he strained against the chains, Chow slashed through the truck's wall. The path to freedom now lay open. A nearby woman caught the suspicious sound. She instantly ordered the vehicle to halt. Stepping out, she found the students already outside. They once again faced each other directly. She demanded to know how they had managed to remove restraints that not even a level 20 cultivator could break. Chow retorted that if he revealed his method, she would never sleep soundly again. Before she could answer, the entire group vanished in teleportation. Fuming, she unleashed her 4-barreled weapon. The blast tore the ground apart beneath them. They were now inside the inner world, but when they returned, reinforcements would surely be waiting. Seething, she swore she would remember Chow's name. Within this hidden world, the group had been assigned an E-rank task: prevent the resurrection of a demon. His allies had scattered, most likely transported to random sites. He considered destroying the NPC's device, hoping it might grant him freedom of movement. Then something sharpened his senses, an unexpected presence. A youth informed his master that the god of pleasure had risen from death. The master rejected the claim, insisting such a thing was impossible. Corrupted corpses sprouted fur, with claws and fangs stretching unnaturally. The youth swore he had seen exactly that, but the master continued to deny it. Chow reasoned that following these NPCs would quickly draw him into the heart of the world's storyline. Feigning death, he stumbled along like a corpse reanimated. Inside a house, the master announced he was leaving and ordered his disciple to guard the god of pleasure. The boy immediately began to pray that the deity would not rise. His prayers were interrupted when strangers kicked open the door. They carried with them what looked like a sarcophagus. Spotting a sealing talisman, the elder demanded to know the boy's ties to Su Xian, the corpse shepherd. The boy answered that Su Xian was his master and asked if the old man was a coffin bearer. The elder chuckled, saying Su Xian's student had some wit. He pressed to know where the master was, and the boy explained he had stepped out but would return. Inspecting the corpse, the old man guessed it had died only recently. Its flesh was firm and still warm. The disciple cautioned him not to insult the deity of pleasure, warning of dire consequences. The man sneered, calling it just a carcass, claiming no punishment awaited for mere words. He added that only corpse shepherds clung to such superstitions, and threatened that if the boy resisted, he would smash him with his clubs. But the disciple argued that any such act was a grave disrespect. Studying the body, the elder admired its fine features. He estimated it would fetch a fortune and ordered Feng Lai to seize it. Hearing this, Feng Lai moved toward the body, startling the boy. The boy quickly blocked his way, refusing to allow the theft. Feng Lai ignored him and struck him across the face. Defiant, the boy shouted that he would defend the body with his life. Feng Lai dismissed him, unimpressed by his size. Knowing the boy would interfere, he rammed his knee into the youth's stomach. The blow hurled him backward across the room. As he staggered forward, the elder scoffed that the boy was far too weak to matter. Meanwhile, Chow, still posing as a corpse, was growing disgusted at the scene. The boy noticed a flicker of reaction from him, and so did the two men who had just entered. Removing the seal from his head, Chow let out a heavy sigh. He thought regretfully of how pointless it was for Feng Lai to brutalize the boy over such nonsense. When the corpse moved, the boy gasped that the god of pleasure had revived. Chow hadn't meant to interfere, but reaching Coffin Mountain mattered more, and he would not allow himself to be sold off. Seeing him stir, the elder launched a poison spell, but it was useless. Chow's fist smashed into his face. The man's body flew, colliding violently with the floor. Only then did he realize this was no corpse, but a living fighter. Assuming it was a trick, Feng Lai attacked without hesitation. His club slammed into Chow's face. The strike had almost no effect, astonishing Chow himself. The elder could no longer tell whether this was a man or a corpse. Checking Chow's condition only deepened the puzzle. He was classed as a reanimated body with an extra 100 points of defense, but lacking health or mana recovery. This explained why the reanimation bell had compelled him to act mindlessly. Yet with his immense health pool, he functioned well without mana. The elder then ordered his disciple to stall Chow while he prepared a body suppression technique. Again, the man lunged forward to strike at the supposedly lifeless body. Q braced himself, unimpressed, preparing his counterattack. His crushing blow drove Feng Lai deep into the earth, despite the latter's guard. Feng Lai cried out to his master, saying he couldn't hold out much longer and begged that he be ready. Yet the cunning elder had already slipped away. Realizing he'd been abandoned without reason, Feng Lai felt betrayed. Q assured him that escape wasn't possible for the elder. Leaving Feng Lai behind, Q sprinted after the fleeing man. One decisive strike was enough to end the elder's resistance forever. Though one opponent remained, he too was crushed in spirit, and Q had no intention of sparing him either. Driving his face into the ground, Q gained both experience and stat points from the victory. His curiosity now turned to the object they carried. It resembled a coffin designed to bind spirits. With one arm, he forced it open. Inside lay his companion, the paladin. Of all people, he never expected to find her, recognizing her slim figure instantly. When she stirred, she frowned, displeased at being identified by such a detail. As it turned out, they too had been drawn into this dungeon mission, which explained why they were reduced to bodies. The nearby disciple stared, shocked that another deity had been reanimated. Seizing the moment, Q spoke directly to him. The boy asked what they needed of him, and Q explained their goal was Coffin Mountain, the very same destination the boy and his teacher sought. After a while, the boy's master returned. The disciple boasted that he had captured the deity alone, prompting his teacher to question how such a feat was possible. Their path stretched far ahead of them still. Elsewhere, monks advanced with coffins in tow, glowing seals swirling as prayers were chanted. Q studied, his environment with sharp focus. The master spoke with one monk, instructing him to go in first and promising the others would follow. He handed a bell to his pupil, ordering him to safeguard the deities. Clutching it, the disciple gave the bell a small shake. Along their route lay the bodies of other examinees. Yang noticed two familiar friends among them. Q felt genuine relief at the reunion in such a place. To the boy's astonishment, those bodies began conversing. It seemed inconceivable that so many deities could be alive. At the same time, elders gathered, one asking if they were prepared for the deities of pleasure. This marked the 5th summoning of spirits, and he urged them to ensure their preparations were complete. That evening, they intended to enter the emperor's tomb. As darkness settled, the moon climbed high, casting silver light over the land. The monks' procession marched on. They assembled before the emperor's tomb, chilled by the night air. With all the deities gathered, one asked if it was time to depart. The head monk questioned him, demanding to know where he thought he was going. Perplexed, the monk asked what he meant. The leader declared the moment had come. The supreme ruler would return. With the bodies present, the descent of the divine emperor was at hand. Using human blood as an offering, they summoned him. At these words, the monks were stricken with dread. They had not realized they were meant as sacrifices. The attempt to reason with the head monk failed. Those desperate to live were told to flee while they could. But flight was futile. None would escape. Reanimated corpses surrounded the area, both striking the monks and cutting off every path of retreat. These were corrupted cadavers, and the old monk grasped that the head monk had plotted this from the beginning. In the turmoil, Ju turned to Gao, asking what should be done. They had to prevent the demon's return. Perhaps this divine emperor was truly that demon. If so, they had no choice but to attack. And they did, striking down the corrupted dead. Meanwhile, the head monk watched as the bodies breached the tomb, enabling the emperor's revival. As the battle raged, closer inspection raised questions. The bodies almost seemed alive. Infuriated, the head monk's rage boiled over. Snatching up his brush, a dark elder began chanting. In the chaos, Chao found himself ringed by corrupted corpses. As his limbs grew heavy, he realized the incantation was meant to suppress reanimated bodies. Gripping his spear, he aimed for the one casting it. A spear shot forth, skewering multiple corpses before striking at the elder. Still, the elder continued his chant. At its climax, he called upon 10,000 hidden corpses. The earth beneath them shifted ominously, striking fear into Chao's companions. Something bound them, leaving them immobile. And they had reason to fear, for their very bodies were fuel for the Emperor's rebirth. The crisis was critical. At this pace, the demon's awakening was inevitable. Glancing at the monk who had accompanied him from the start, Chao reminded him of their mission, to halt the demon's resurrection. But the monk refused, insisting it wasn't a demon at all. The demon of their lore incinerated everything in his path. Known as the Dry Demon, one of the 4 corpse ancestors, he destroyed human, corpse, or deity alike. Stopping his revival was paramount. Mustering his magic, the monk shattered the binding spell on himself. For a brief span, curses against the undead would not touch him. That short reprieve was enough. He swore that as long as he stood, the demon would not leave its tomb. Looking at his peers, the elder demanded to know why they hesitated. Gathering their courage, they began freeing the reanimated bodies. In desperation, the sinister elder declared no one could prevent his master's return. Chow, however, was certain he could. With a crushing strike, he felled the elder, his corpse collapsing atop the very artifacts he had relied upon. But the sarcophagus had to remain untouched by human blood. They were too late. The elder's blood seeped into it. From below, a monstrous hand thrust upward. Dragon's breath surged anew, and the system confirmed it. The demon had risen. Their mission had shifted. Mephis stared in awe at the phantom form that appeared before them. The same stunned disbelief was mirrored in every face, except Chow's. Now their objective was to defeat this monster. The mission difficulty escalated to rank D, an epic-class boss, level 20, boasting 4,000 health and 223 strength. Some monks fled outright, convinced resistance was futile. The demon's gaze fixed on one of the deserters. He sprinted after him, filling the man with sheer terror. Nearby, the demon spotted another youth. That monk rushed toward Chow, hoping the demon's attention would fall on him instead. Realizing the betrayal, Chow seethed at the cowardice. The demon now loomed before him, prepared to strike. But before it could, Chow launched his own attack head-on. The blow sent the demon flying, as if borne by wings. It smashed into a wall, only to regain footing moments later. From its jaws, it exhaled a cloud of venomous vapor. The toxic haze swept past Chow, narrowly missing him. Zhu shouted a warning, stressing its deadly nature and urging caution. Reacting swiftly, the ice sorceress unleashed her magic. Her frozen spell engulfed both the mist and the demon. At the same time, the healer replenished Chow's fading strength. With little effort, the monster shattered the icy prison. One student considered calling upon his shadow arts. In a sudden flash, he appeared at the demon's side and slashed. The creature's expression made it clear the strike did no harm. Yet the provocation was enough to infuriate the fiend. With a surge of power, it cut all the combatant's attributes in half. Chow's own health dropped by 50%. Unsure of how to proceed, they realized only teamwork could overcome the enemy with their diminished strength. A massive shockwave of rubble erupted before them. It was Chow, driving his fists into the demon. The necromancer's blow left the boy stunned, 10 times more powerful than his strongest strike. The demon countered, striking Chow back. The force of the hit hurled him across the battlefield. Yang rushed to him, asking what their next move should be, since none of them could pierce the monster's defenses. Nearby stood the jealous student, so Chow moved toward him. With cunning force, he kicked the youth straight toward the demon, forcing his hand. The shadow mage closed the gap to the beast. He summoned his darkness in desperation. Before being struck, he raised a barrier for protection. Chow was surprised at how valuable this skill turned out to be in that moment. The demon clashed with the shadow mage directly. The student then invoked the sacrificial power of his shadows. This allowed him to intercept the monster's devastating strike. The impact was so powerful the ground beneath collapsed. Still, the shadow mage held the front line, enduring the blows. Behind him, the 2 other mages prepared their incantations. The professor announced her spell was nearly complete. Once fully charged, she unleashed a torrent of ice. Simultaneously, Yang cast his binding spell. The reborn demon was hammered by both at once. Chow admired Gusu's tenacity as he bore the monster's rage. Yang admitted his mana was spent. The outcome now depended solely on Chow. Chow surged forward, his hand swinging toward the abomination's face. The strike landed with overwhelming force. The demon's visage was grotesquely distorted. But Chow did not stop at one blow. He continued pounding away mercilessly. The flurry of punches was so relentless that the once fearsome demon looked like a helpless child. After enduring such punishment, the fiend finally resolved to retaliate. With a roar, it declared even its father had never beaten it like this, and swore vengeance in kind. Chow, unlike the demon, didn't wait to be struck. He countered instantly, launching it into another wall. The beast rose again, slowly and stubbornly. But Chow was already upon it, ready to finish the fight. At that moment, a monk shouted that Chow must not deliver the final blow. He claimed it was his duty instead. But words could not halt Chow's descending strike, and once more the demon's head slammed into the ground. The mission concluded, with Chow receiving an A-rank evaluation. Alongside the gained attributes and experience, he advanced another level. Then the monk revealed that anyone who killed the demon would inherit its curse. Even as they spoke, the demon's body slowly faded. A crimson mist rose from its remains, and the monk warned Chow to beware. The blood-red vapor gathered before him. The system message confirmed it. Chow had been cursed, doomed to die in 30 days. He asked the monk if there was any cure, but the elder admitted no record existed of one. His companions asked if he was all right. He nodded, saying he was. Yet inwardly he wondered whether the university might hold some knowledge. Yang pointed out the soul core had formed. The envious student thanked Chao for the effort, then seized the core for himself. Recalling his past humiliation, he decided it was time to return the trick. The artifact, graded A, could steal half an enemy's agility for 10 seconds. Yang fumed that someone who contributed so little would keep the prize. Before Yang's complaints went further, the envious one attempted to exit the secret realm, but failed. Yang had bound him with his magic. Straining to restrain him, Yang shouted at Chao to act swiftly. The envious one insisted he did not want to fight, but Yang's spell would not last. Chao was already moving toward the troublemaker. If it came to battle again, he would test the stolen item against him. The thief activated it, draining half of Chao's agility, gaining only 4.5 points. The pitiful gain shocked even him. Without the corpse's curse weakening him, Chao felled him with a single blow. Soaring through the air, the envious one could only marvel at how much health Chao must possess. Still, he landed on his feet, refusing to stay down. Without his stolen agility, he boasted they would never catch him and bid farewell. But again, teleportation failed, this time frozen in place by the professor's ice. She had not forgotten his treachery during the exam. Through his arrogance, Gusu had made enemies of them all. Desperately, he invoked the shadow sacrifice, but Chao's strike drained most of his health. He was hurled away while his ring tumbled into Chao's hands. Weakened nearly to collapse, he departed with a vow of vengeance. The ring itself looked promising and would surely be useful later. Chao thanked the professor, who cautioned that the envious student was vindictive and dangerous. With that, they all exited the dungeon. Chao now stood at level 12, his strength and vitality formidable. Outside, a rescue party awaited them. Not far off, the chief examiner sighed with relief at their safe return. The directors gathered with the survivors. The examiner promised a full explanation. Those guilty of the disaster would face justice. Given the severity, the exam was suspended, and the students were ordered back to their universities under escort. Before leaving, the professor reminded Chao again about the vengeful one. Chao reassured her he feared no troublemakers. In a darkened castle, a woman knelt before her master. She reported that the group had escaped the secret realm. The master recalled meeting Chao once, finding him unimpressive. But now he realized the boy was the son of Qiaoan King, sparking his curiosity further. At Chao University, ordinary life resumed. The bus carrying the students pulled in. Chao and his companions stepped down after their long ordeal. They were greeted warmly by Professor Peng, relieved at their safe return. Chao asked to meet Director Ji, explaining he had something urgent to discuss. In Ji's office, the director waited to hear him out. Chao revealed that during the dungeon he had been cursed, a mark etched into his arm. The director immediately recognized it. A death curse. He declared Chao had only 30 days to live. Peng, alarmed, asked if that could truly be the case. The director confirmed grimly, though uncertain if fate was absolute. Their best hope was the sage's protection, an S-grade relic, but none were available. The director admitted he once possessed it but had already used it. If another existed, it was unlikely to be sold. Despite reaching out to contacts, no one had the item. Chao asked if another solution existed. There was one, but beyond his current power. Better to spend his remaining days in peace. Still, Chao was determined to try for survival. The director warned bluntly that pursuing this path would mean death. Chao replied firmly he had no alternative. The director revealed the location, a D-tier dungeon. Chao had fought monsters in E-ranked dungeons before, but this was on a different scale entirely. The gap was vast. Only intermediate adventurers dared such places. Though his gear wasn't poor, Chao began concealing it. The director told him he had no designs on a student's loot, but Chao pressed to know which dungeon it was, intent on going there. Annoyed, the director's patience wore thin. Releasing his aura, he inflicted 500 damage on Chao without lifting a hand. Chao's eyes burned as though slashed by blades. Yet, to the director's surprise, the boy remained standing. Unlike Peng, the director found this persistence remarkable and asked again if he still wished to know the dungeon. Before replying, he restored Chao's health. "It is the Lake of Purification," he said at last. "This place could cleanse any negative condition entirely." Chao thanked him, and the director cautioned him. No novice had ever returned from there. Chao promised he would take care, saying he understood. Afterward, he declared his intent to set out immediately. But the director urged him to wait a little longer. He handed him an artifact, explaining it would aid him in that perilous place.